right. I call the 2389th meeting of the Milwaukie City Council to order. I will note that it's our first meeting in our new City Hall, and we'll be making a formal announcement later, but encourage everyone to come out on Friday to join us in the official dedication of our new City Hall and the farewell to our old City Hall. This meeting is being held in person at City Hall and by video conference. The public may participate in this meeting by coming to City Hall or joining the Zoom webinar. The meeting is being broadcast live on the city's YouTube channel and Comcast Cable Channel 30 in city limits. There will be opportunities for the public to speak during this meeting. If you would like to address council, you may come to City Hall or participate via Zoom. If you are interested in speaking, please let staff know by filling out a yellow comment card for those at City Hall or emailing ocr@milwaukieoregon.gov for those on Zoom. When it is time to take public comment, staff will monitor the comment cards, email inbox, and Zoom participant list and chat. We will take comments in the order they are received and seen. Written comments may be emailed to ocr@milwaukieoregon.gov. Spanish translation services are available upon request. The public is asked to request translation and other meeting accessibility services at least 48 hours before the meeting. For more information, contact the city recorder at 503-786-7502. Servicios de traducción en español está disponible cuando sea solicitado. Se pide al público que solicite servicios de traducción y otros servicios de accesibilidad por lo menos 48 horas antes de la reunión. Para obtener más información, llama a el secretario de la ciudad I'm not going to be able to say the numbers in Spanish. I will get practice with Gabriela before the next time and be able to say these numbers in Spanish. Translation services are also available in other languages. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The City of Milwaukie respectfully acknowledges that our community is located on the ancestral homeland of the Clackamas people. In 1855, the surviving members of the Clackamas signed the Willamette Valley Treaty, also known as the Kalapuya Etc. Treaty, with the federal government in good faith. We offer our respect and gratitude to the indigenous people of this land. And I note that that land acknowledgement is on our new plaque in the front of the building, which is really nice. So, announcements. And I had a couple of, okay. The next Letting Library lecture series takes place on Wednesday, October 4th, tomorrow. This month's lecture will be about the contributions of Chinese immigrants to Milwaukie and the impacts of the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882. The community is invited to attend the event at the Letting Library or watch it live on Zoom. Join us for the new City Hall grand opening event on Friday, October 6th, this Friday. Festivities begin at 4 p.m. at City Hall. Say goodbye and thank the building for 85 years of service. At 4:20 p.m., a parade will begin at Historic City Hall with community members, council, and staff, along with the Milwaukie High School Marching Band. Then at 4:45 p.m., a ribbon cutting ceremony will take place at New City Hall. Lastly, at 5 p.m., the community is invited to attend an open house to tour the new building. View and comment on the final plans for Scott, Balfour, and Bowman Bray Parks on Sunday, October 8th from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. at Scott Park. Grab free donuts, chai, or hot chocolate, get your face painted, and experience other family entertainment. I will note it's going to be 80 degrees, so hot chocolate was probably planned last weekend when it was cold. The Fall Author Series continues Thursday, October 12th at 6 p.m. with Brian Lowry. In Selfless, Lowry argues for the radical idea that the self as we know, that voice in your head, is a social construct created in our relationships and interactions. For more information about these events and others, please visit the city's homepage at www.milwaukeeoregon.gov or call 503-786-7555. I will just add that the second Saturday work parties continue in Minthorn Springs on the 14th, and they're actually having a sort of an open house there that day. I've invited the residents of the new 7 acres to come check out Minthorn Springs, but there will be people there pulling ivy and clematis and blackberry, et cetera. So that's from 9:30 to noon. And for those who don't know, Minthorn Springs is across 37th Avenue from Milwaukie Marketplace. So you park down near the Planet Fitness and walk across to access the wetland. Anybody else have announcements? No? Okay. Then we will move on to our proclamations. First, we have a Indigenous Peoples Day proclamation, and that will be presented by our Equity and Inclusion Coordinator, Gabriela Santoyo Gutierrez. This is Gabriela's first official. She's got 2 proclamations tonight. This is her first, I think, official appearance with us. So yes. We welcome you to the city and look forward to seeing you many more times.
Thank you. It's already on. Hello, good afternoon, members of council. As we dive into proclamations, I know we have about 5 this afternoon. I'm excited to get us started. Specifically speaking to the Indigenous Peoples Day. I want to honor that. To me, every day is Indigenous Peoples Day, but this specific celebration calls to reflect the ways we talk about history, treaties, and specifically to stop celebrating European colonizers who've led large amounts of violence to Indigenous communities. And instead this day to recenter, to mourn, to respect, and to celebrate Indigenous and Native communities. And this is often through storytelling, art, and dancing. And I believe you read the proclamation next,
I will read it unless you would like to do so. You are welcome to do so. I know on the next one we're going to share the responsibility, but I'll go ahead and read this one.
Thank you.
Whereas the City of Milwaukie recognizes that the Indigenous peoples of the lands known as the Americas have lived on these lands since time immemorial, and whereas this city wishes to honor the fact that the community of Milwaukie is built upon the traditional homelands of the Clackamas peoples, where some descendants are part of the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde, a community of 5 tribes, Kalapuya, Malala, Umpqua, Shasta, and Rogue River, and affirms the legal rights of the 9 federally recognized tribal nations in the state of Oregon and all Indigenous peoples everywhere. And whereas Indigenous Peoples Day was first proposed in 1977 by a delegation of Native nations to the United Nations sponsored International Conference on Discrimination Against Indigenous Populations in the Americas. And whereas this city is committed to protecting and advocating for justice, human rights, and the dignity of all people who live, work, and visit our community, and to supporting the principles contained in the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, endorsed by the United States on December 16, 2010. And whereas the Declaration recognizes the right of Indigenous peoples to the dignity and diversity of their cultures, traditions, histories, and aspirations, which shall be appropriately reflected in education and public information, and places an obligation on states to take effective measures in consultation and cooperation with the Indigenous peoples concerned to combat prejudice and eliminate discrimination, and to promote tolerance, understanding, and good relations among Indigenous peoples and all other segments of society. And whereas this city wishes to recognize the second Monday in October as Indigenous Peoples Day as an opportunity to reflect on the ongoing struggles of Indigenous peoples of this land, to celebrate the thriving cultures and values of the Indigenous peoples of our region, and to stand with Indigenous peoples everywhere. Now, therefore, I, Lisa Beatty, Mayor of the City of Milwaukie, a municipal corporation in the County of Clackamas in the state of Oregon, do hereby proclaim October 9th, 2023 to be Indigenous Peoples Day in Milwaukie. Thank you.
Thank you.
And with that, we will move on to Hispanic Heritage Month, which also will be introduced by Gabriella, and which I will note is not exactly a calendar month. It goes from the middle of September to the middle of October?
Yes.
Correct. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I was especially honored to present this one as someone who identifies as Mexican American and Latinx. And as Mayor Beatty said earlier, we're going to be reading, sharing this proclamation with reading the English one. If you would please carry that, and I'll read the Spanish one for us. But this specific proclamation acknowledges and appreciates the tremendous impact at the social, political, and economic level that Hispanic and Latinx populations have made as the second largest racial ethnic group in the United States. And they often celebrate through community, connection, food, music, and lots of dancing. And to get us started, I'll go ahead and read the Spanish proclamation version of it. Anybody else who knows Spanish, please read along with me. Considerando que cada año los Estados Unidos observa el Mes Nacional de la Herencia Hispana, celebrando la cultura, la herencia y las innumerables contribuciones de aquellos cuyos antepasados se extiende a España, México, el Caribe, América Central y América del Sur, y considerando que el Mes Nacional de la Herencia Hispana comenzó como una observación de una semana declarada en 1968 y creció hasta convertirse en una celebración de un mes en 1988. Y ahora se celebra del 15 de septiembre al 15 de octubre cada año. Y considerando que el 15 de septiembre es una fecha significativa porque marca el aniversario de la independencia de los países latinoamericanos de Costa Rica, El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras y Nicaragua. Además, México y Chile celebran sus días de independencia el 16 y 18 de septiembre. Respectivamente, y considerando que celebramos el mes de la herencia hispana para mostrar nuestra gratitud por los logros, la inspiración y el servicio que nuestras comunidades hispanos y latinos ofrecen todos los días, nuestra ciudad, región y país. Y considerando que las otras personas hispanas, latinos, latinas y latinxis ayudan a impulsar nuestra economía de pequeñas empresas como trabajadores, dueños de empresas y empresarios. Enriquecen nuestro ambiente académico como maestros, profesores y ingenieros. También participan en el buen gobierno y en el mejoramiento de nuestra sociedad. Asumen roles de liderazgo en el movimiento laboral y garantizan nuestra salud y nuestra comunidad como enfermeras, médicos, cuidadores y trabajadores de cuidadores de niños. Y considerando que esta ciudad Desea reconocer el mes que comienza el 15 de septiembre y termina el 15 de octubre como una oportunidad para reflexionar sobre las enormes contribuciones, celebrar la cultura, las tradiciones y la diversidad y apoyar a las comunidades hispana y latina. Ahora, por lo tanto, yo, Lisa Beatty, alcaldesa de la ciudad de Milwaukie, una corporación municipal del condado de Clackamas, en el estado de Oregon, proclamo por la presente que el 15 de septiembre, el 15 de octubre de 2023 será el mes de la herencia hispana en Milwaukie. En testimonio y con el consentimiento del Consejo Municipal de la Ciudad de Milwaukie, firmo el presente el 3 de octubre 2023.
Gracias, Gabriela.
Gracias. I would say it's up to you if we want to go ahead and read the English version as well. But thank you so much all for allowing me to honor these two proclamations and read the one in Spanish.
Well, yeah, we don't have to read the English one, right? People have it in their, does anybody have a strong feeling on that? Yeah, I think we can probably forego the reading in English.
If we're done, I just wanted to take a moment. Mayor, you did introduce that Gabriela, this is her first meeting. And because her mom is watching, I felt the need to also just talk about how lucky we've been at getting her onto this team. Gabriela comes from ODOT and has a great experience working with really dynamic teams around hard topics in government. And she's brought that skill set here, and it's so obvious how lucky we have been in getting her as a teammate. So I just wanted to congratulate her on making it through today.
Thank you.
She was a little nervous, but she did an excellent job and really has been an incredible addition. So welcome.
Thank you. Very glad to be here.
Great. Thank you, Gabriela.
Gracias.
All right, our next item is Archives Month proclamation, introduced by Greg Heemer from the Milwaukie Historical Society and our city recorder, Scott Stauffer. While they're getting ready, I just wanted to take a minute to recognize our city recorder and assistant city recorder, who both had some play on the statewide stage in the last week. Scott was awarded by the Oregon, they're both members of the Oregon Association of Municipal Recorders, and Scott was awarded the Presidential Award of Distinction for 2023, and he was also elected the second vice president, which means he will kind of go each year up to be first vice president and then to be the president in a few years. And also Nicole Madigan. Well, before I move on to Nicole, I should note, I recognized from reading some of those materials that this is your 10th year at the city of Milwaukie.
That's right.
Yep. And we've been very lucky to have you. And Nicole Madigan also took on an elected position within the Association of Municipal Recorders, correct? So we're grateful to have both of you playing on that statewide stage, and congratulations to both of you.
Thank you, Mayor Beatty and Council. It's a privilege to serve our great community in our city, and it's a privilege to say that this evening in a beautiful new space. And I couldn't have asked for a better helper and co-worker in the recorder's office, so thank you, Nicole. Tonight, the proclamation.
No,
Okay.
go for it.
Our proclamation is for Archives Month, which is a big piece of what recorders do across the state, and we are very lucky in the recorder's office here at Milwaukie to have a great partner at the Milwaukie Historical Society. So I'll just say thank you for taking the opportunity this evening to proclaim Archives Month, and I will turn the mic to our great colleague and partner, Greg.
I almost feel like I don't need to do my little speech, but here we go. Mayor, city councilors, and city staff, my name is Greg Heemer, the Communications Director of Milwaukie Historical Society, the owners and operators of the world's largest museum dedicated to Milwaukie, Oregon history, the Milwaukie Museum. Milwaukie Museum is open Saturdays, 11 a.m. to 4 p.m., located at 3737 Southeast Adams Street. Since I am limited on time, I cannot tell you what a great year 2023 has been. We held 3 performances at the museum, opened our newest exhibit, Milwaukee's Historic Women, completed the Milwaukie 2023 project, held 3 Letting Library lecture series, and started the home inventory. And also, since my time is limited, I cannot tell you about the next Letting Library lecture series, October 4th, entitled Chinese Immigrants, Contributions and Exclusions, with a special address by Council President Desi Nicodemus, with our partners Northwest China Council starting at 6 p.m., or tell you about the Christmas at the Museum, December 9th, a time for young and young at heart to sit on Santa's lap and enjoy some Christmas cheer. All events at the museum are free, so everyone, regardless of income, can come and enjoy our great museum and events. We are proud of preserving the stories of a place and the people who dwell there in any given moment, and believe it is essential to understanding a community and how it came to be, and telling the stories a community can only be complete when all voices and perspectives are heard and included in the shared history of a place and its people. Our civic and community archives seek to collect and preserve the documents, tales, traditions, and voices of those who came before us. And civic and community archives cannot exist without the professionals and volunteers who work tirelessly to preserve the voices of our community. Milwaukee's shared history is carefully preserved by the Milwaukie Historical Society and the officers of the City Recorder, who recommend the proclamating of Archives Month as a reminder that the events of yesterday and today must be documented to better inspire a more perfect future for all residents of our community, regardless of age, race, gender, orientation, income, or beliefs. Speaking of the Office of the City Recorder, not only have they already heard great accolades about them, but it is rare when a city and a historical society work so well together in sharing our beloved history, the good, the bad, and the ugly. With Scott's commitment to sharing stories and involving us in activities, to Nicole's bubbly attitude and willingness to chip in, we at the Society forever want to give our praise and reiterate the continued support and the love for the City Recorder's Office. One of the great examples is giving away the archival shelving in the basement of the old City Hall. It would have been easy just to throw it away, but because of Scott and Nicole's efforts, it will be recycled, reused, and repurposed for generations to come. Thank you is never enough, but Scott and Nicole, sincerely, thank you and we love you. Without your help, Milwaukie Museum could never strive in the path that it has. Mayor Beatty, will you please read the proclamation?
I'm happy to do that. Whereas preserving the story of a place and the people who dwell there in any given moment is essential to understanding a community, and it is critical that the story of a community can only be complete when all voices and perspectives are heard and included in the shared history of a place and its people. And whereas civic and community archives seek to collect and preserve the documents, tales, traditions, and voices of those who came before us, and such archives could not exist without the professionals and volunteers who work to preserve the voices of a community. And whereas Milwaukee's shared history is carefully preserved by the Milwaukie Historical Society and the Office of the City Recorder, who recommend the proclaiming of Archives Month as a reminder that the events of yesterday and today must be documented to better inspire a more perfect future for all residents of our community, regardless of age, race, gender orientation, income, or beliefs. Sorry. Now, therefore, I, Lisa Beatty, Mayor of the City of Milwaukie, a municipal corporation in the County of Clackamas in the state of Oregon, do hereby proclaim the month of October 2023 as Archives Month, in the hope that all voices may be appreciated, recorded, and preserved for the betterment of all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. All right. Next proclamation. Is Peter here?
He looks like this tonight.
Oh. Okay.
We had a sinkhole open up actually on one of our roads. It's fine. It's out of the drive space, but he's had to go on site. So
Oh, my.
You get me for
Arbor Day
which will
proclamation.
not be an equal representation. So thank you all for having us this evening. We did just want to highlight again here in the regular session that we will be holding our Arbor Day celebration on October 28th. Events will be from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. Across from Old City Hall. That is actually the same day as trick-or-treating, just a little bit earlier. So come on down, enjoy the Arbor Day celebration, and stay with your kids for some trick-or-treating on Main Street. With that, I'll turn it over to the mayor to read a proclamation.
All right, great. As those who didn't tune in earlier, our work session included some talk about our tree code, and it was pointed out that, many places celebrate Arbor Day in the spring, but we moved it to the fall, which is much more fitting for the Northwest, where you plant trees in the fall. You don't, if you want your tree to survive, it's the best planted in the fall when the rains can help it settle in. So whereas in 1872, J. Sterling Morton proposed to the Nebraska Board of Agriculture that a special day be set aside for the planting of trees, and this holiday, called Arbor Day, was first observed with the planting of more than 1 million trees in Nebraska and is now observed throughout the nation and the world. And whereas trees play an integral part in capturing and storing carbon and are therefore critical in a solution to the climate crisis. And whereas trees can reduce the erosion of our precious topsoil by wind and water, cut heating and cooling costs of residents, moderate the temperature of increasingly developed and warming cities, clean the air and provide health benefits for the community, produce life-giving oxygen, and provide and improve habitat for fish and wildlife. And whereas trees in our city increase property values, enhance the economic vitality of business areas, and beautify our community, and trees wherever they are planted are a source of joy and spiritual renewal. Now, therefore, I, Lisa Beatty, Mayor of the City of Milwaukie, a municipal corporation in the County of Clackamas in the state of Oregon, do hereby proclaim October 28th, 2023 as Arbor Day in Milwaukie. And I urge all citizens to celebrate Arbor Day and to support efforts to protect our trees and woodlands. And further, I urge all citizens to plant trees to mitigate climate change and promote the well-being of this and future generations. Thank you. And our final proclamation.
We have two more.
Oh, we have two more?
You have two more. Well, you have a proclamation, then you have the community.
Oh, we have a presentation, but yeah, we only have one more proclamation. And that's presented by, yeah, you're on.
And actually, as she's coming up, just because I'm having fun tonight and we're in this beautiful new building, I wanted to call out that she has actually been here. Laura's been here 2 years this week.
Huh?
And she has been an incredible addition to this team and has given such grace and leadership to the planning. 3 years? 3 years. I was even off by a year.
I know, it's hard to
It's
believe.
been
I started in
amazing.
2020.
No, it's been such a gift. So I just wanted to call out how much we appreciate everything you're doing and your leadership around all of these projects. So thank you for everything.
Well, thank you for saying that, Ann, and I just want to thank, I have a great team of planners here and a great group of planning commissioners and a really wonderful city council, and just I feel really lucky to be here and be in the city of Milwaukie. I think that we do great things here in the city, and we always kind of joke in the planning regard that we punch a little bit above our weight. We think of ourselves as being able to do really big things, and I am happy to be a part of that, thrilled to be a part of working with you all to meet your goals and to do all the things that we want to do here in the city of Milwaukie for everyone that is here. And I guess I'll read my little thing now, but so I feel like I said some, what I wanted to say, but I will continue, but I'll be brief. Okay, thanks for having me tonight. I really appreciate it. Thank you for acknowledging the benefits that planning can bring to our community. I feel really fortunate to work in a town where residents are deeply involved with creating the vision for Milwaukie today and in the future. People here are invested in building infrastructure that makes our city a safer place to walk, bike, and drive around. People here are supportive of creating affordable housing options for folks from all kinds of backgrounds and income levels. People here are committed to hearing voices of all of our community members, in particular those voices who may have been left out of past conversations. I personally, as is all of the planning team, am committed to continually rethinking how we engage and empower all community members to create an environment in which everyone thrives. I invite all Milwaukeeans to participate in planning the future of our city. When we all work together, we can do incredible things. So thank you. And with that, I will hand it over to you, Mayor Beatty, to read the proclamation.
And I would just note that there are some opportunities coming up. We're going to have community conversations in several locations about the Neighborhood Hubs project. And then following that, I assume there will be some public meetings on the transportation systems plan at some point. So there are definitely ways to plug in and engage this fall. Okay, here's the proclamation. Whereas community planning provides a wide range of benefits, including opportunities to, 1, evaluate and manage the constant change that affects cities and the region in a way that provides better choices for how people live, play, and work. 2, involve and empower all people who live and work in the city in making choices that determine the future of their community. And 3, educate public officials and community members so they understand, support, question, and demand excellence in planning and plan implementation. And whereas the month of October is designated as National Community Planning Month throughout the United States of America and its territories, and whereas the American Planning Association and its professional institute, the American Institute of Certified Planners, endorsed National Community Planning Month as an opportunity to highlight the contributions sound planning makes to the quality of our built and natural environment. And whereas the celebration of National Community Planning Month gives us the opportunity to publicly recognize the participation and dedication of the members of the Planning Commission and other resident planners who've contributed their time and expertise to the improvement of Milwaukie. Now, therefore, I, Lisa Beatty, Mayor of the City of Milwaukie, a municipal corporation in the County of Clackamas in the state of Oregon, do hereby proclaim the month of October 2023 as Community Planning Month in the City of Milwaukie in conjunction with the National Celebration of Community Planning Month. Thank you. We will see you again in a bit. And then we have a special report from some folks from Northwest Family Services on tobacco use prevention.
Actually, Abby's going to drive, but I'm going to sit here.
I will just note that just last week I was invited to Northwest Family Services 40th anniversary celebration, which was quite a gathering and had some very impressive speakers and told some very emotional stories, I think. And for those who don't know, Northwest Family Services serves people throughout our community and throughout the metro area. Their headquarters is just outside Milwaukie at the corner of King and Linwood. But anyway, I digress. I'll turn it over to you to talk to us.
Thank you, and good evening, Mayor Beatty, members of the City Council, and city staff. My name is Mark Chorney, and I'm a program planner with the Tobacco Prevention and Education Program at Clackamas County Public Health. I'm here this evening with a couple of my colleagues who will introduce themselves momentarily, but I first want to thank you for the opportunity to speak with you, and congratulations on your lovely new City Hall. Go to the next slide. We're going to cover objectives, and then I'll let you guys introduce. We spoke with you in August 2022 about the impact of flavored tobacco on youth. Today, we are here to indicate what has changed since we last visited, discuss recent data on youth use and access to flavored tobacco products, offer a call to action on these products, and express gratitude for prioritizing youth health and well-being. The Tobacco Prevention and Education Program at Clackamas County works to reduce exposure to secondhand smoke, encourage tobacco users to quit, and prevent youth initiation of tobacco and vaping products. We approach this work in several ways, including collaborating with a variety of partners. And I'll turn it over to Abby.
Hello, my name is Abigail Wells. I'm a Prevention and Community Public Health Department Manager for Northwest Family Services. Good evening, Mayor Beatty and councilors and council staff. I'm going to just talk a little bit about Northwest Family Services. Northwest Family Services supports family stability, child well-being, and victims of crime by focusing on the social determinants of health. Programs include housing, behavioral health, youth empowerment, basic needs, and family support. Programs encompass a broad spectrum of support, including health and social service navigation, youth prevention and intervention programs, and outpatient alcohol and drug treatment.
Hello, my name is Michael Cox. I'm the campaign manager for Flavors Hook Oregon Kids. We're a coalition of more than 50 trusted organizations here locally and nationally. And our goal is to end the sale of flavored tobacco products in Oregon. We've been in this space now for well over a year. Most recently in the legislature, we had a bill, HB 3090, passed the House Healthcare Committee and made it into Ways and Means before the session sort of broke down over other issues. We're hoping to go back to the legislature next year. We started this journey in Washington County, where the county commissioners passed an end to the sale of flavored tobacco products at the county level. A group of realtors and tobacco corporations took that to the ballot, where we won with 76% of the vote, and then after that took us to court. So we're currently in the Washington County court system seeking a ruling there. Subsequent to that, last December, in her last act as chair, Deborah Kafori helped lead passage of a flavor ban in that county. No referendum was filed, but there was also a court case, but that was decided quickly and in our favor. So that ordinance goes into effect January 1st of next year. And what's the risk here in Clackamas County is that as these ordinances go into effect on the local level, there may be some pressure for tobacco retailers and hookah shops to move here to Clackamas County as well.
We are going to briefly discuss why are flavored products a problem. 81% of youth e-cigarette users use flavored products. Fruit, candy desserts, mint, and menthol are reported as the most popular flavors.
And we're going to skip this slide just because we might be short on time, but we can come back to it if need be.
Flavored products contain high amounts of nicotine. One cartridge of e-liquid can contain as much nicotine as 2 to 3 packs of cigarettes. Nicotine is highly addictive and can cause serious harm to young people's developing brains, impacting learning, memory, and attention. Lifelong addiction. The tobacco industry knows that flavors hook youth. This creates a new generation of smokers. There's substantial evidence that e-cigarette use increases the risk of ever using combustible tobacco cigarettes among youth and young adults. Almost 90% of adults who smoke cigarettes daily first try smoking by age 18.
The next 3 slides present data from Oregon's Student Health Survey, which is a collaborative effort with the Oregon Department of Education to assess student health, safety, school climate, and culture. This chart shows youth substance use for 8th and 11th graders in Clackamas County and compares that to their peers across Oregon. The county is represented by the dark blue lines and the state average by the lighter blue lines. As you can see, Clackamas County 11th graders consistently use tobacco and vaping products at higher rates. It's also worth noting that 81% of those 11th grade tobacco users said they use flavored products. The chart also illustrates alarming data on other substance use, but we're focusing on tobacco and e-cigarettes today since we're presenting specific actions that can be taken by the council now to address those products. Next. Here we see how students view access to 3 different substances, revealing that more 11th graders in the county perceive access to e-cigarettes as very easy or sort of easy compared to their peers across Oregon. On this and the following chart, blue represents the county and the minty color represents the state. This last slide shows that both 8th and 11th graders in the county primarily get their tobacco products from a friend or family member under 21 years old. And these figures are significantly higher than the state average, 8 percentage points for 8th graders and about 9 for 11th graders. We also see that nearly 20% of 11th graders that use tobacco get it from a store or gas station, also several percentage points higher than the state. With that, let's take a closer look at the retail environment. This is an enlarged detail of an analysis produced by our epidemiologist, and it shows tobacco retailers indicated by the red dots and schools, the blue dots, in and around Milwaukie. The circles around the schools indicate a 1,250-foot radius. Since retailers near schools expose students to tobacco products and normalize their use and may even provide an illicit source, as we saw in the last slide, it's important to consider where they are in our community. Milwaukie has 23 tobacco retailers within its city limits and 4 within 1,250 feet of a school. If you include the 2 on the other side of the city line at Linwood and King, across the street from Northwest Family Services, that would put the total at 6. Since 97% of tobacco retailers in the county sell flavored products, it's likely that most, if not all, of the retailers shown here do as well. In 2022, the new Oregon Tobacco Retail License Program conducted 500 minimum legal sales age inspections across the state. During these inspections, e-cigarettes were sold more often to underage persons than other product types. Of the tobacco retailers in Clackamas County that had a minimum legal sales age inspection conducted last year, 17% sold tobacco products to underage persons. And while this year's inspections in the county are still ongoing, we thus far are not seeing much of an improvement in the number of tobacco retailers caught selling products to youth under age 21. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Mike.
So what are our calls to action for this body? One, we'd really appreciate if you pass a resolution in support of a statewide flavor ban. Cities and other localities across the state are starting to take this up. We've passed some on the coast in the city of Newport and the city of Siletz, with maybe a dozen more localities looking to help us in that way. Pass a flavor ban for the city of Milwaukie like they've done in Washington County and Multnomah County. Speak with legislators in Salem about youth use and access to flavored products, and pass a policy restricting tobacco retailer proximity to schools and other tobacco retailers. The session coming up in 2024 is going to be a short 1-month legislative session, and so these resolutions passed by localities are really going to help keep this issue on the front burner, where the number of issues is going to be fewer than in a full session. And then finally, we have our contact information here. And we really want to thank you for your time today, and thank you for your support.
We're happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Okay. Do you have any, want to go through? I have some questions. I
Yeah,
imagine
I have
others
some
do too.
questions.
Yep.
So I'm wondering about the role of the Board of Health versus the role of our legislative body, and if you could speak to the differences there, or how you see the process of a flavor ban, and I'll direct that to you since it's a campaign issue, and then maybe Mark, if you have Board of Health thoughts.
Sure. When we passed the ordinance in Multnomah County, their health department there was critical in leading that years-long process. But ultimately, this is, we think, a matter of law, and ultimately, we think state law. And so it's appropriate for a body like a city council to take it up.
Yeah, for us in Clackamas County, it would be the Board of County Commissioners that would be passing, or that, would have the option to pass a flavor ban in the county, right? But historically, they've kind of resisted passing those kinds of policies that they believe should be taken up by the state. But that doesn't preclude, of course, as Mike said, and as we talked about here a little bit, cities passing something on their own.
Okay, thank you. And I didn't mean to put you in an uncomfortable position since you're a county staff person, but I think it's critical to know that the county board operates as the Board of Health and then has the public health authority to be able to pass something like that across the entire county. Then there would be support and momentum for certain local jurisdictions to lead on that. My other question has to do with, I think one of your slides mentioned the number of vape retailers and hookah lounges that I think someone said had potential of moving into Clackamas County, or if that is maybe one of the issues that the county board is showing some hesitation around. Can you elaborate more onto that?
Yeah, I can speak to that, Mike, and you can add something if you have something to add. I don't know if the Board of County Commissioners is considering that, but I think the point we're trying to make is, with Multnomah County passing a flavor ban, Washington County passing a flavor ban, they haven't been implemented yet, but that leaves a small sliver of the Portland metro area left, right, that doesn't have protections against flavored tobacco, essentially, North Clackamas County and North Clackamas County School District. So it's just something we wanted to highlight, and we've did a presentation to the Happy Valley City Council a month or two ago talking about this as well with some youth advocates. So it's something we want to raise up as those bans go into effect. There's potential that some of those retailers that can't sell those products in Washington and Multnomah would be looking for a new place in the metro area to set up shop.
And specific to hookah lounges, I think they're maybe somewhere between 11 and 13 statewide. There are no new hookah lounges opening up, but those existing licenses are fungible and I think can be moved from jurisdiction to jurisdiction.
Okay. Well, I think it's important to also note that those are, in order to either use, products in a hookah lounge or to be able to leave a vape shop with tobacco products, you have to be 21, right?
Correct, but as we've seen with the new program statewide, they're
Yeah, you do have to be 21, but I think, what is it, statewide, 26% of retailers sold tobacco to underage persons in 2022. So the sales are still happening, unfortunately, but you are correct. Yeah,
Okay.
21 is the legal age.
Okay, thank you. I think that's all of my questions right
now. Not so much questions. I'm actually glad that this is happening right now. I know some of us were on council when you all came before last year, and we actually did. We were looking into the idea of doing a flavored tobacco ban in citywide, and I think we pretty much had consensus on that issue. But there was some other, because of the way that the county set up and how the board, as Councilor Stavanger mentioned, also acts as the Board of Health. There were some issues there with doing that. There was also some issues that we had where if we were the only city that, if we banned it, like because our line kind of ends at Linwood, there's some sales that would happen just right across the street, for example. So we were looking at that as a potential issue too, and how do we mitigate that? So a county ban would be, a state ban would be the best, but a county ban would probably be the next best thing. I did provide testimony in favor of a state ban. And I also included in that testimony that it shouldn't just be a ban that they looked at, but they should all, because of the proximity to schools, they should look at distancing the allowable space. You're allowed to open one of those, right? I know in some states that you can't be within 1,000 feet or 1,000 yards within a school to sell either marijuana or tobacco or alcohol. It's unfortunate seeing how many of our schools are surrounded by these stores. I think we know why. I mean, you don't have to be a genius to figure that out. So I do appreciate all the work you do. I also say this is important because I have had correspondence with Jamie Dunphy with the American Cancer Society, and it's something that I wanted to bring up to you, Mayor, that I haven't had a chance to, about that exact resolution. So I have been working on something like that I wanted to present to you as well, and hopefully get on a future agenda so we can do that. I'm a major proponent of this. I'm a former tobacco user. I know what it does. I was one of the kids that smoked cool menthols because of the menthol flavor. So I know what this leads to. My father was a smoker, so that didn't help either. He used to smoke in the car with us in the car with the windows up. So I understand how important this is and the damaging effects this can have, the lasting effects really, because tobacco use is still an addiction, and it could be an addictive problem. And having kids and seeing those numbers, I mean, the fact that we wouldn't do something, that something wasn't already in place to make sure that at least our children were not in direct way, that they're not the target in terms of the advertising, the flavors, you would think we'd have already done something about that. And it's shameful, really, that we haven't done anything to protect kids. I was shocked that you can open up a tobacco shop so close to a school. It just blew my mind. Even on the Nextdoor app, there's posts on the Nextdoor app of Milwaukie shops where there's children on camera stealing the e-cigarette liquid and getting their hands on the flavored tobacco. And that just tells you, that exasperates it in my opinion, because now children are actually stealing to have this. Stealing candy is what children used to get in trouble for, toys. Now you got kids trying to steal e-cigarette liquid, tobacco products. So it is a danger, it is harmful, it is a serious issue, and it's something that needs to be addressed right away from the state. And I look forward to putting that resolution before council.
Thank you. Councilor Massey?
This is for Mr. Cox, I believe. A short legislative session, is that going to happen?
It's certainly possible. We had strong sponsorship from both sides of the aisle and bipartisan bicameral support last time. There is a question as to whether or not A, this issue is going to be appropriate for a short session, or B, how the two parties are going to come together and make that session work. However, that's why we're asking cities to get on the record and take a policy position here. We think a statewide ban is the answer, counties the next best, and that cities can really weigh in and urge folks, their colleagues in the legislature, to take up this important issue next year.
Okay. Well, that's obviously the best solution, is to do it, statewide. We may have to take it on a more fragmented basis, but that would be the gold standard, have the whole state ban this. Are there other states that have banned this?
Yes, sir. Voters in California voted to ban to end the sale of all flavored tobacco products, including menthol cigarettes, last year, and that is currently in effect this year. The early data is flowing in on that. I think work in Washington State is beginning on this issue as well, there are some others, some 100 localities across the nation who have taken this up.
Okay. Massachusetts as well is one that banned.
Okay, thank you.
Council President?
Yeah, I just have a brief comment. As a teacher, and my wife's a teacher, we know that kids are vaping in bathrooms in schools, in elementary schools. So this is very important to get this ban going, because we can't. It starts with that, and then it moves on, and then you think about equity issues with folks of color, and are they getting the proper health care that they should? So I'll just leave it at that. You have my support.
Thank you, sir.
Well, I was going to ask sort of what Councilor Massey asked about what the prognosis is in the state legislature. I will say I was in the Capitol pre-COVID, maybe 2018 or 2019, when there was quite an organized lobby on an earlier version of this ban, and quite a number of people in the building, and it didn't pass, so I don't know what to read into that. I mean, last year it was sort of a special circumstance because of the nature of the session, and a lot of things didn't get considered, but God, I would hope that we could get to a statewide ban. Anyway, I invite you to, I mean, I do believe we have done resolutions before in support of that, and maybe even a resolution to the county commission in support of a countywide ban. I would invite you to send me some sample resolutions, and the ordinance question is a harder one because of the enforcement, but send some samples and we'll share them with all of council, and we can have a conversation about that at a future date. Any other questions for people?
Just a quick question about timeline. I'm sorry, 2 questions. Sorry. Are you in conversation with other cities about looking at examples of resolution language, and then what sort of a timeline would need to be put in place for that to be helpful in the special session?
The answer is yes. We are in current communications with more than a dozen cities and counties throughout Oregon. 3 have already passed such a resolution, and the timing that we're looking for really is this calendar year to set us up to send that message to the legislature to act on this next year.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. Thanks for coming out.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. This is the part of the agenda during which council will hear community member comments regarding city business that is not already on the agenda. Before we begin, is there follow-up from the September 19th community comments, Ms. Ober?
So at that meeting, we did have a community conversation about the SAFE program and projects coming off of Stanley and King. We're continuing to talk with the Safe Routes to School program, just about ways that we might be able to get support going into the grant cycle. The specific ask that we made was that the consultants be paid to write a grant or a draft grant that we could submit for the Stanley portion of the projects. It sounds like that might be difficult to get funding for, so that's as far as I've gotten today, but we're continuing to look at opportunities to see if there's ways we can integrate this into our next budget.
Okay, thank
Thanks.
you. So before I read this long script, do we have anyone who wishes to speak? Mr. Stauffer?
Mayor Beatty, there are no emails asking to speak, and there's nobody in Zoom, and I have no comment cards.
Okay. All right, then we will forego reading that long script and move on to the consent agenda. Tonight's consent agenda includes minutes of the City Council August 15th, 2023 work session, August 15th, 2020. Oh, some of these have been removed?
Yeah,
I'm sorry,
the script was not updated. All of the August ones were, the September 5th ones were not.
Are not on here, okay. So tonight's consent agenda includes minutes of the City Council August 15th, 2023 work session, August 15th, 2023 regular session, and August 20th, 2023 council dinner, and a resolution amending the Public Safety Advisory Committee bylaws. Does any member of council wish to remove a consent agenda item? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion.
Move to approve consent agenda as presented.
A second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda as presented. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, say no. None heard. Consent agenda passes unanimously. All right. So our next item of business is the continuation of a prior discussion of the Planning Department work plan. And I invite Planning Manager Laura Weigel, back up.
I do not. All right, hello, everyone. Nice to be here again. Okay, so this is a continuation. I want to apologize. 2 weeks ago, I was supposed to be here. I was not feeling well at all, so here we are tonight. And so I thought what I would do is instead of going through the whole thing, is to kind of jump back in where I think we left off last time, if that's okay with everyone. Okay, so I think what I heard last time we were together is, so I'm looking at attachment 7A3, which is kind of the proposed order of the work plan, which is essentially the same as it's been for a long time, with some projects that have been added based on the housing work that the city is required to do by the state and that we want to do. So I am looking at that last column, future C, and kind of thinking about the order of work that the planning department is going to be doing. And you can see that the first item in that list is flood protection. And I think last time I explained to you all that there's going to be new federal regulations that are going to be coming down. And so we're hoping to not update that code until we get new regulations from the federal government. And I think there was consensus that we were going to wait until 2026 or 2027 when those regulations come out. Then I also heard last time that the sign code update may not be the project that we want to work on next, as our sign code is actually in really good shape at the moment, and we can continue to have that on our work list, but we will drop it back down to the bottom of the list unless I hear otherwise from you all tonight. And then I think we talked about the housing production strategy implementation work, the evaluate incentives for affordable housing. I think I heard from folks that you all were interested in moving that up on the work plan, and that is something we can do fairly easily because it's staff-led and we already have a really good code in our back pocket that we can look at. And so those were kind of the top things that I remember taking away from our last meeting. And so at this point, I would just like to open it up to see if you all have any further questions about any of the projects that are on the list, or if you wanted to talk about changing the order of the work at all as we're moving forward. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Do you have?
So Mayor, I'd actually can I come back to questions?
Sure.
That'd be great. I wasn't at the first discussion of this, so I'm getting my feet under me, and I'm sure I'll have questions later.
I'd like to know more about what exactly the business industrial, it doesn't have to be exactly.
Well, right now,
what the
sorry,
updates
I
are.
didn't mean to interrupt.
No, you're fine. Just what those updates, what exactly we mean by updates?
Yes, good question. So that is one thing that we've just recognized as a planning department, that whereas the code itself is it's a little antiquated, it's a little out of date. And so we kind of struggle sometimes when someone comes in and is asking for a use in that area to kind of make it fit. So, but we usually do, but we feel like it could use another look just to kind of get updated with current uses, business uses. It's not a big pressing matter. We don't have any real issues with it, but it hasn't been updated in a really long time. So that's why we added it to the list, but we put it at the bottom of the list because it's not something that we actually need to do with any pressing urgency, but we do want to do it as a code package amendment at a later date.
Okay, what about the urban growth management agreement?
Yeah,
New agreement, yeah.
Yeah, the urban growth management agreement is something where our agreement is pretty outdated. It's been around for quite some time. It's basically our agreement with the city with Clackamas County for how we look at those unincorporated areas that are adjacent to the city of Milwaukie. And we have designated areas that ultimately the city will be responsible for. I started looking at that when I first came to Milwaukie, but there was kind of a political shift, and we didn't get the feeling that Clackamas County was interested in updating those agreements at the time. Right now, despite the fact that it's very out of date, We don't have big issues with it, with how it's working right now. If the city were to undertake some sort of larger look at annexation policies or annexation program, we would probably want to go up. There would be more urgency to update that agreement. I do think it's just good practice to have those things kind of buttoned up and be kind of more reflective of the current day because our maps are updated. So that is something that we have on the work plan, knowing that we want to do at some point, but kind of waiting till there's the political moment to where it feels more comfortable and Clackamas County might be more interested in engaging on that.
Okay, and then just the new town center plan is my last one.
Yeah, the new town center plan. So basically, we've got a 1997 downtown plan, and then we've also got the downtown riverfront plan, And so we want to take a fresh look at that and probably kind of try to put those plans together, have them be one plan, then with appendices, but kind of look at the downtown and update some of those standards. Like some of the things that we have even in our standards now are a bit antiquated and we're not using them anymore because 1997 is a pretty long time since we've looked at that. So that is something that we want to do. And the Metro also, with CFIC rules, the climate-friendly, equitable communities, and the potential for Metro to be updating their 2040 plan, we want to take a fresh look at that.
Thank you. Those are all my
Yep.
questions.
Councilor Rassi?
Yes, could you just elaborate on what the potential parks and institution zones CSU analysis really is? There's so many things going on with parks. I just don't know where all these things intersect with all the other balls in the air with parks.
Yeah, that's a good question. The comprehensive plan specifically said for the city to look at a new parks and institution zone. And so, but we've also been really thinking about, right now, there are kind of conditional community service uses within our other designations, such as in the housing residential areas, right? So you have community service uses. And so with the new climate-friendly, equitable communities rules, we are not allowed to require parking anymore for all of those places. And so we think that now is a really good time to go in and understand what impacts those uses might have on our community and how we might think about them a little bit differently now that we can't regulate parking. So that's kind of the CSU part of it. And then the parks and institutions are actually considered CSUs. And so we just want to go in and look at all of that. And it's a really good time because of removing the parking requirements. We don't have a way to mandate parking. So we need to think about, well, even if we're not requiring parking, some of those uses do have impacts on our neighborhoods. And how can we think about that differently? And are there new ways to kind of address those impacts? So we feel like we need to kind of, well, number one, the comprehensive plan wanted us to look at the parks and institutions. And then we also are thinking about it in terms of community service use. So we feel like there's a whole assessment that needs to be made on how we're zoning those uses. And I don't know, Anne, you look like you want to say something.
I'm not sure I'm right. But thinking back to when we were working on the comp plan, and I believe the mayor was in these meetings, so she might have more recollection than I do. In other cities I've been in, the park zone actually allows for us to do more park-specific items on the site without having to come in for conditional approvals or through an actual full planning process. So when I was a part of the comp plan, my intention around this was actually to create an easier process for us to make improvements to parks, as long as they were done with community support and buy-in. And that's why we wanted to move this forward. It doesn't necessarily matter who owns the parks or who's in charge of the parks. It's more how do we manage whoever's in charge of them, how do they manage those sites to update them for deferred maintenance and other projects?
Thank you.
Anything else? No? Okay. Council President? No. Okay. I also had a few questions and a number of comments. So on the UGMA, it was interesting, I wrote down, you said how it's we don't have any problems with how it's working. I mean, because we're not doing anything, right? I mean,
We're not
how
really
is it
doing
working?
anything. It's working in that when people want to annex to the city, they come and they ask us to annex, and that's how it's working.
Yeah.
That's what we're doing, but we're not really doing much more than that. We don't have any planning authority in those areas that are within our jurisdiction that are in Clackamas County, so we don't have we're not doing anything at the moment.
Yeah.
If we wanted to do something differently, then we'd probably want to update our agreement.
Right, right. I mean, yeah, I'm not even sure how relevant that agreement is anymore, but I have been watching some meetings that our community development director's been in at the state level talking about housing production in the county. And I think it's becoming increasingly apparent to some people in that room that maybe more annexation or incorporation is warranted. Depending on where that conversation goes, this may move up, but I would agree with you at this point, there's not a lot of motivation to do much about it. I mean, at some point, the council may decide to make annexation a priority, in which case it would, again, also need to move up, but it's not a council goal at this point, so.
I did just want to call out, so as much as the applications coming in are usually one-offs, we have had some really interesting little conversations that just sort of show up on our plates. One of them recently was in our relationship to the south, not to the east. A lot of our annexation discussions happen to the east, but it was more some new development that's coming in on the southern end. And so I agree, it's not right. It's a lot of work. Well, if we wanted to do a major overhaul of our UGMA or the relationship we have with the county, but it is a constantly percolating discussion. And so I just wanted to make sure all the council members who maybe haven't been in all those conversations know it is something we routinely get questions about.
Well, and I do think, I mean, for the council members, other than the council president, and it might have even been before his time. I mean, we did have the annexation of Cherokee Farms, right? Other than, so we have the sewer annexations. They're kind of their own thing, and they're really not really related to the UGMA because we had an agreement with Clackamas County over those. But the Cherokee Farms housing subdivision did annex to the city. They got to develop under county standards, as I recall, but they agreed to annex to the city, and we had to cut a deal on taxes, a phase-in of the taxes to get that to happen. I mean, I do think we're missing some opportunities. Like we know that the Coida greenhouses just east of the city along Monroe, which are, I think it's like 10 acres or something, is about to redevelop, and but it's not contiguous to the city. It's about five blocks outside the city line of, east of Linwood. It's interesting because in the meetings at the state, they have a really nice map of the city limits and showing what's urban and incorporated. And Clackamas, ours is pretty solid block of color with a little bit of, houndstoothing over there where the sewer extensions are. Happy Valleys is looks like a COVID molecule. It's full of little spikes coming out of it because Happy Valley has done what you call cherry stem annexations all around, on all sides of the city. So it's really interesting to compare the two. We could be trying to do more cherry stem annexations of some of these things that are redeveloping, but again, we haven't made that a priority. So, but I think there's some interesting, it'll be interesting to see in the next year. This will either move up for us really quickly, or it'll, die a slow death. So, I also, the town center plan. I will tell you that I was on planning commission starting in 2004, so that was only when that plan was 7 years old. I have never once heard a land use application where the town center plan played any role whatsoever in our, so it's not just that it's old, it just isn't that relevant.
Yes.
So I guess that's my question is, why do we care? And because we don't use it, we don't refer to it, we don't use it. The other question sort of related to that is, Metro is doing urban growth boundary, whatever, over the next year through late 2024. But they say that starting in 2025, they're going to start their next visioning beyond the Metro 2040. So doesn't the town center plan kind of tie to Metro 2040? And if they're going to do that revisioning, should we wait for that?
Yeah, and that's why, we have it a little bit out. We were hoping that they'll catch up to us. I'm not sure if they will, but that's kind of where we're thinking. We're waiting a little bit for that to occur. And I think it's, I think too, just thinking about the town center plan and thinking about, I don't know, we haven't had a larger conversation about downtown and what we might want in downtown, and what if there are things that we want to change, what's working, what's not working, how can we stimulate some growth, how can we look at what's occurring and try to find different strategies to change what's occurring. So I think that is a useful conversation for us to have as a community, just because we haven't looked at it or talked about it in a long time.
And I just I'm laughing a little bit because Laura and I literally had a conversation this morning about a project that would tie into this work. Part of one of the things that I think she and I and Joseph are all trying to also do in this presentation tonight and generally in this conversation is, council has goals. Are we meeting those goals? Are those, there are things also that staff feel we need to do in order just to meet the general expectations of the community. So there's a little balancing. In this one in particular, I think there's a little balancing of some things that we're getting feedback over the years from the downtown core groups about what they'd like to see. And so we didn't want to take it off the list because of that input and that interest.
Well, now, just to be clear, just because the Metro Town Center plan is that old, that doesn't mean it's that long since we've looked at downtown. We did what was called Moving Forward Milwaukie in about 2012 or 2014.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, we rezoned downtown pretty substantially then. Which doesn't mean we shouldn't be talking about downtown. I think having a conversation about downtown policies is totally worth doing. I guess I just don't know that revisiting the town center plan is the hurdle we need to have to do that.
Well, and I think that's going back to the first thing I said around goals, like what are the priorities that we're trying to build this to, just to make sure that we're building the right work plans to meet those goals as well. Thanks.
Sure. Sign code. I said it last time, I hate to say it, but because I've been calling for a sign code update for like 15 years or something, but I do agree. It's, the big, when we've had crises like the proliferation of the god-awful electronic billboards along McLaughlin, we've managed to do quick code fixes. I will say, I have a code fix that would get rid of those, I think. So the original, since none of you were here on council or off, at the time of all that, when it passed the Planning Commission, when the first code came through the Planning Commission to allow for or to recognize that we didn't have a lot of ways to stop the downtown billboards or the electronic billboards, we passed the Planning Commission's version of the ordinance said the billboards could only change once an hour. And that was our way to try and discourage them from going in. The city council at the time didn't accept that recommendation and went to the 8 seconds or whatever it is now. But yeah, there was a lot of movement. So I think that something like that might be worth considering, but I do generally agree that the sign code is not a hot button topic, and we've managed to put the fixes we need into the kind of packages like what Vera's bringing us later tonight, right?
Yep.
So I wanted to ask about, I saw this thing in the next phase of neighborhood hubs about area plans for Chapel Theater. And I was curious about what you guys were thinking about there, because I guess I don't understand why we wouldn't just expand the boundary of the 42nd Street neighborhood Main Street a little bit to loop in Chapel Theater, but why would we need an area plan?
Well, just when we've been thinking about hubs and what, there's a lot of impetus on the property owners to really be the people that are making the changes there, right? We're trying to make sure that people can do the things that they want to do with their property by making code changes. And then the second part of that is we are also trying to hopefully develop economic development programs, maybe one program that might be kind of a small business alliance for the city or some sort of grant program. But the other thing that we've been thinking, and this is just an idea we haven't floated any of this with you all because this is just what we've been brainstorming through the process and hearing from folks, is that there's a couple of areas in the city we thought that it would be something to show those property owners that area that the city is also committed to doing something in that little area to kind of show people we're invested in this area. We value this neighborhood hub and we can see it changing into something else, evolving into something else. And so it could be something as simple as, when we say area plan, we don't mean anything really big. We mean something like going in and putting banners in, or maybe there's some sort of planting program where you put planters in, something kind of alerting folks that we're investing in this area of the city. You all are property owners, we're asking you to do something, we're gonna do something too. And because we have so few commercial areas in the city, the little ones that we have that have small businesses in them, we really wanna figure out ways to support them and kind of be partners with them. So that's just kind of our thinking, that's our idea at the moment, that just to explore the possibility of doing these small little area plans where we can bring some life to those areas without just relying on property owners.
Okay, interesting idea. So Willamette Greenway. I know you just had a hearing on apartments in Willamette Greenway. But really, I mean, to me, that's like, oh, we've revisited the Willamette Greenway so many times. Why is it so high on the list? I guess I don't understand what the pain point is that makes you have Willamette Greenway that high on the list.
Well, I think one, so good thing that you brought up that development that came in, because the only reason, that should have really just gone straight through the planning process without having a hearing. The only reason we had a hearing is because it was in the Willamette Greenway. Otherwise, it would have been allowed outright, which means that we don't have clear and objective standards in the Willamette Greenway, and we need to fix that for residential housing. So that is something that we do actually need to fix. We could get in a little bit of a pickle, bind with that. So that's something that we need to go in and fix. And also the boundary, quite frankly, if you look at the boundary, we're not exactly sure how or when the boundary got established. It was a long time ago. And that's probably why it says we need to establish 2 tiers of review. But the boundary kind of weaves and goes along, and we're not really exactly sure what the rhyme or reason to it is. And also, a lot of the boundary extends all the way like 450 feet away from the Willamette River, and there are buildings in between. Like, there's no reason that boundary should be all the way up at 450 feet. So that's why we want to go in and look at that and take a look at the boundary and make sure we have clear and objective standards. Just because we have had to go through some process, and it just is, people have to make a lot of explanation for a problem that doesn't actually exist, because we're so far away from the river. So we really wanted to look at the boundary again so that people don't have to jump through hoops that they shouldn't have to be going through.
So I will just say that the last time we looked at it, and I don't remember if it was Denny, I kind of think it was Denny, indicated that, I mean, there was definitely whoever was the planning director at the time, there was definitely a recognition that the boundary seemed a mess, but it was sort of like, we get this dictated from the state, and it's sort of kind of what you and Brett were talking to us about last meeting about the HQAs and WCR, or whatever they are, HCAs and WQRs. So, I mean, is there that much we can do about the Willamette Greenway boundary, I guess is one question. And the second question is, how many, I mean, now that with that apartment building and with the approvals of the development at Waverly Greens, how much more developable property do we actually have in the Greenway? Is it really worth, being so high on the list? Because we don't have that many properties that are, developable. A lot of the Greenway is, public land or whatever. Yeah.
That's a good question. I don't actually know the answer to that question off the top of my head. It's very specific in the comprehensive plan. It's the most specific chapter. So there was obviously a lot of thought that went into what folks wanted to see and do as part of the comprehensive planning process. And so part of the reason, really the clear and objective standards is the thing that we know that we can control and we know that we need to fix. The boundary, I haven't dug into it enough to understand what the flexibility is with that, but that would be something that we would want to dig into and try to understand. And so I think to whether the point about it being high on the list, this is the list that we've had for 4 years, right? So this is the flow that we've been talking about for the last 4 years. And so it's always been there, and it's always been, that's where it's lived. And so if you want to make adjustments to it or have a conversation about whether or not it's still important, and I guess it goes back to the council goals and what are the council goals, and then are the order of these projects kind of in alignment with what the council has in their goals and what they want to see kind of from a larger perspective for the whole city, not just about planning, but what it is that we're trying to accomplish for the whole city.
Yeah, I think that my ask, and I had said this in an email, but I'll just reiterate it here, is that we focus on the policies tonight, not necessarily the exact moments on the list where they fall. I say that because the other part of this is we were talking today, actually Vera came in today to talk about how we were learning things about state passage of legislation that's going to directly impact this work plan that's not even on here yet. That we didn't realize existed, and evidently DLCD didn't even realize had passed during the legislative session. So there are literally packages that come at us all the time. So I would just ask you not get too wed to the 3 months and instead be more focused on, are we prioritizing the work that you want us to prioritize? Are we not? And balance it that way. Thanks.
Yeah, well, that's my spiel on Willamette Greenway. I feel like we have revisited it a lot more than many other things on this list. I will say I did follow up on the conversation that we had with Brett, and Councilor Stavengerd was maybe going to bring it up at C4 about trying to get Metro to revisit their HCA mapping. I did get some, I do know it's important to Tualatin. I didn't get a lot of other cities, other mayors telling me it was important, but I don't know if that means they just haven't talked to their planning staff about it and don't know that it's important or not. But I did hear from Tualatin that it's a big issue for them. And I did get the sense from Metro that if there was sort of a groundswell, they might be willing to take it up because it is related to housing capacity, right? So I just put that out there for your information.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. And I do hope Councilor Stavengerd will bring it up in C4, because I think the more places we just talk about it, people will go back and ask, is this a problem for us? So. Okay, I think that's the end of my list of questions. Okay. Anyone else? Anything else?
I have another question. If we end up, I'm looking at it, if sign code goes away, based on what's showing now, the next thing up, or the earliest, or the soonest item that gets worked on is the neighborhood hubs and the evaluate incentives for affordable housing, correct?
Yes.
So,
And just the caveat to that, we are working on the natural resource assessment, as we talked about the last council meeting. So we're moving forward on the natural resource assessment. Okay.
Okay.
Just want to be sure that was clear.
I'm just, if we move anything above these, right, based on time frame, because we're looking at the time frame and we're looking at potentially doing things sooner. But if we end up doing that, does that jeopardize the time frame for the affordable housing items on here? Like, will that delay any of the housing items on here?
No, we remember, if you remember, recall in the housing production strategy that we adopted, we're required by the state to implement certain things by certain
Right.
years. So we would never jeopardize that regardless, because we have an obligation to do those in the years. If you see like right at the end of the number, like on number 3, in it says 2025 in parentheses, that's
Yeah.
when we told the state we'd start having those conversations.
Okay.
Counselor,
We're
can I
gonna
just make
discuss
sure
this,
I'm
right?
clear? Yeah, this is great. I just wanted to put out there, so when we spoke at the 2 meetings ago about this plan, and I had said that the housing stuff just doesn't shift, we're going to protect it because we've already put it through the HPS and it's required because now we've made an agreement. I do just want to make sure that as we're talking about this, that means that other things actually can't bump those out of the way either. Does that make sense? So we're not shifting them based on this conversation, but we also can't, they're just not movable.
Okay.
Thanks.
I mean, that's a good thing.
It is. Thanks.
Unless I know we talked a little bit about the evaluate incentives. We talked about even moving that up last time because we kind of already have a really good draft of that code. And so it's one of those things that we could move along in between other things. It's not one of those things that takes a big community outreach effort, right? That's something that's a technical, surgical thing that we can do with you all, with Planning Commission. And so we can use that as we're moving through other things, when we have little moments in time, we can fill that in and move that through the process.
And are we going to have a council discussion after questions, or is this it right here?
It's totally up to you. I was just going to note, since we're not getting used to it yet, that we have a goose on the dais as well.
Yes, we do.
Yeah.
It's a polite one so far. I'm joking. Thank you for all of this information. And I think that there are themes here around housing and around economic development, but more community-centered economic development that seem to be mirroring conversations that council, is interested in above and beyond our goals. So I think in terms of the things that stand out to me and the things that I'm excited about being a part of in those 2 categories, those are the primary ones for me. I have a question about capacity, because when we look at attachment 7A2, the original order, and then the proposed order for discussion, there's quite a bit in here. There's a lot that is required by the state, and I know that you've put this into a 4-year time span, but what does that do to the capacity of your team? Is this manageable? And, I guess, let me just start there.
That's a good question. It's a great question. I appreciate the question. I think that, there's a lot to do, and a lot came at us in this last couple of years that was completely unexpected. So kind of what I've done is this is like the best case scenario, that everything goes right, that we move really quickly, that no unknowns come at us, that we can get projects kicked off sooner rather than later, which isn't always the case. Things take longer than you think they're going to take to get going. So this is kind of the best case scenario. And what happens is, I don't know what's coming at us the next few years. I mean, it could radically impact us. I'm not really sure. But even when those things come at us, the hope is that we just continue down the path of these other things that we've got on the agenda that we know we want to do, and we just put timeframes on it that we hope are going to work out, and then and if they don't work out according to this plan exactly, because they're not going to, then we just adjust as we go. So capacity is always an issue. We can't do everything all at once. And so everything probably moves a little bit slower than this actually says. But this is what I hope in best case scenario. If we could just go forth and do it exactly the way we want to do it, and boom, there we are. But that doesn't always happen. That never happens.
I always think about the lists that I make about things that need to be done around the house. They're beautiful lists.
I love these lists.
But when it comes down to, you know, the kid comes home tired after school and, you know, I didn't have time to do something or work came into this part of my life, I guess what I worry about is that this list of everything that's categorized as future has the planning team running at 100+% through the next 4 years, and I'm not sure that that's entirely sustainable. So I think what I heard the mayor saying about sign code update is that, and I don't want to speak for you, Mayor, but it sounded like there was some interest in deprioritizing that one, so that would not be number one on the list anymore. It almost seems like future needs a parking lot. And I'm not sure if that works into the work planning, you know, spreadsheets. But
We don't do parking lots here. Someone
Bike
reminded
racks?
me we do bike racks.
I think I suggested that, and then I just walked right in front of it. Okay.
Well, yeah, I mean, the ones that move off the top, you know, move to the bottom or move to, you know, wherever they move to, yeah.
Yeah, because really if we're looking at, like, what are we looking at for the next 2 to 3 years?
Yeah.
What do we know? Like, what are we going to work on right now, right? And so right now, and if you look at the part of it, I mean, I love this list because things in gray we've accomplished. I always like to remind ourselves of this. The things in yellow are the things that we're working on now, right? And so I feel like if we just looked out the next 3 years and tried to have, like, because I know I'm going to be working on the natural resource assessment. I know I've got to come back to you all with the CFEC code. I've got to come back, we're going to come back with Title 17. So there are all these things that we know the knowns. And so really, if we just looked at kind of like, so then what are the next 3 big projects that we want to do? And then the smaller projects we can kind of do as an undercurrent. You know, it's kind of like, when we were talking about the affordable housing incentive code, we can do that as an undercurrent. Like when we have time, we pick it up, we work on it, we bring it out. So it's really, to me, it's what are the big things that we're looking at. And natural resources is one of them. We came to you all and we're moving forward with that. And so I guess if that's helpful, thank you for us to maybe think about it. And I know when I look at this, I'm gonna be retired. And then hopefully I'll get through this thing. I'll be like, at the end, I'll be like, oh, okay, this is the last thing.
We'll frame it for you.
Right.
We've been known to put things like that on T-shirts.
Yeah. So to your point though, Counselor, I think, yes, it is good to think about what are the couple of the really big projects that we're going to work on in the immediate future. And then everything else kind of shifts a little bit depending on what comes from the state and how your goals might change over time.
Yeah, I think it's helpful to look at what the engagement level looks like too, because some of those that are low engagement, you know, they could be easy things, you know, that come up at a certain time where, you know, amazingly we have downtime.
Yes.
Whenever that shows up. So, but I am thinking about, you know, like the future. It's almost impossible to plan out the next 4 years of these future projects. You have the things that are finite, but there's so much that comes your way. So it's almost as if, you know, it's really unfair to you and your team to have to plot this across the 4 years. And my worry is that everything that the council might bring up or that the community might bring up gets put into this future, you know, category. And so I guess, I just have to say that that's a concern, and I worry about the capacity of our teams, when we do get some very large, even unfunded mandate, that might come out of the blue. I'd rather you have the 20 to 25% bandwidth to be able to pivot and deal with that.
I appreciate that. Yeah, it's the things that we know that we can do that don't, like you said, the level of engagement. That is a helpful tool for us, because some of the levels of engagement are super high, right? Like with the transportation system plan, that's a really high level of engagement. Neighborhood hubs has had kind of a moderate to high level of engagement. A lot of these things we can do without a lot of engagement. But there's other things. I mean, the hubs will need a little bit of engagement, but we don't see ourselves hiring consultants for that. We think we can mostly do that ourselves with a little bit of outside help. The Willamette Greenway will definitely need a high level of engagement. So, yes.
Other things?
Trust you.
Thank you.
I was curious at one last question on 7.A-1.1.
Yes.
The comp plan implementation set in the middle, the potential neighborhood hubs phase 3 is at the bottom, but then further on, it's a much higher priority. What made you give it a higher priority?
Well, so what I did with this one is I kept it completely intact as is, right? And so then when I moved it over, we've realized as a team that going from the Neighborhood Hubs project that was done in 2019 and then coming back to it in 2022, there was a lot of piecemealing trying to understand what was done and why it was done the way that it was done, and not feeling completely that it was done exactly. It wasn't done with the kind of same goals in mind that we think that it should be done. And so we just felt like that if we put a pause on that and don't do phase 3 now and put it way out in the future, then we kind of have to go in and reevaluate all the work that was done in this phase and how things got prioritized and who did people talk to. And so there was just a lot of, I believe, a lot of duplication of efforts that we would not have to do. We could do phase 3 for less money now than we can do for it in the future. And so I'm wanting to try to build on some momentum and not set it aside, but to kind of keep it going, knowing that we don't think that we're going to have to ask for a lot of outside money for this. We don't need to hire a lot of consultants for this. We think that we can do it ourselves primarily. We haven't done the full assessment of what the actual work would be, but we kind of just want to capture the momentum that we have, and we're already having a dialogue with the community, so we thought it would be helpful to just continue that forward instead of putting a pause on it and then coming back to it in 5 years.
Okay.
That was the rationale.
Well, and let me just say about, and this is more for education of council probably than anything else, but yeah, because I don't know what the staff conversations were, but I can tell you on the Comp Plan Advisory Committee, the CPAC, there was this, the neighborhood hubs was originally supposed to be in the comp plan. And there was a consultant working on who did this report. And I remember thinking, oh my God, that's opening up a lot of questions. And I am assuming that's why the decision was made to pull it out. But at some point along the line, the decision was made like, this is not something we can resolve in time to pass the comp plan. So it's sort of pulled out and put on a table.
Yeah, I think there's goals and policies in the comp plan that reflect the desire of the community to have hubs. Like there's so much support for it, right? But we couldn't do the hubs project and do the comp plan at the same time. Yes, to your point, we had to pull it out and do it later. And so we did all those other things that we had to do with the House Bill 2001. And we knew that, and we knew the transportation system plan, and then it was hubs is next.
Yeah. But it was, it was definitely a conscious decision to, pull it out and put it on a slower track. Yeah. Okay. Any other comments, questions? All right.
Comments?
Yeah.
Like, is this it after this?
Yeah, I think we're
It's
done.
over?
I think we're done, so.
Yeah, just real quick. What I'm trying to, because I know we talk about what gets us to our goals, but when I look at this, I don't see anything on here that gets us to the 3 goals that we have, right, on this plan. But what I look at, the lens I'm looking at this through is what on this work plan can we do that will help take care of things that aren't on our goals, that are still important and potential crises for community, right? So that's why housing. And then that's why I was focusing on the urban growth, the business industrial, and the new town center plan, because I look at that as economic development. And housing and economic development are 2 very important things that are not goals of ours. So I look at it like, what are the 2 big things that we've discussed over and over as a council, even in retreats, that we don't have as goals? And it's housing, right? We talk about affordability, and then we talk about economic development. So why wouldn't we put the focus on the things that we want as goals, but can have as goals that are damn near just as important, if not more important than some of the goals we currently have? So that's just where I'm looking at it is why I'm putting such an emphasis on the housing and those 3 economic development, quote unquote, goal, items on here, because those are so important. I mean, you know, in this discussion, I've heard Metro multiple times and waiting on Metro and waiting on, I mean, you know, it's uncomfortable.
Well, I would just say that I don't think it's true that none of them serve our current goals. I think the natural resources work serves our climate goal, and maybe serves our equity goal. I mean, I think there can be an equity component of several of these. The hubs for sure.
Definitely.
So, I mean, I don't think it's true that they don't serve they're not like directly tied to our goals, but I think they can serve our goals.
But, okay, so then I'm glad you brought that up. Because in that case, housing and economic development still can fall under diversity, equity, and inclusion, correct? That can be both, because economic development, providing more opportunities, better jobs, right? Better opportunities for businesses here to not have to shut down as our businesses start to diversify. Housing, again, you know, typically marginalized communities are the ones that suffer when it comes to housing. So yeah, as far if you want to look at it that way, then again, the 3 housing and the economic development ones fall right in line with our first goal. But at the same time, what I was trying to just say is that there's things on here, like we were talking about Metro. You know, I don't want to wait for Metro to figure out what we're going to do with our town center. Like you know, having something done in 2012, I mean, it's 2023. It's 11 years ago. And I know that progress was made in this city through economic development over those years. However, COVID just put us back. Whatever we gained, we're back. Because if you walk outside these streets at 8 o'clock right now, they're dead. They're dead. Businesses are even closed. I mean, you can't do anything in Milwaukie after 6, 7 o'clock at night on a weekday, or on a weeknight for that matter, except for the beer store. So, you know, I don't want to wait for these other entities. I mean, we get emails from an individual about Metro's housing issue, right? I'm sure you all get it from, I can't remember the name, but there's an email that we all get from an individual who screams at how Metro is not doing anything with some of the funds and the lack of initiative that they're working with in terms of their housing stuff. I don't want to wait for Metro or wait for the state or wait for certain things. I get that we need to, right? I understand that, but we still have an obligation to everyone here to not, I mean, if that's the case, if we're going to wait for them to make moves on certain things, then why are we even here on this dais? Just to do business as usual and rubber stamp other things? I mean, that's not what we're here to do. We're here to innovate. We're here to lead, right? Again, I go back to our climate action plan. How many people probably looked at that and laughed and was like, Milwaukie, a climate action plan? What are you guys going to do to the climate? I've gotten emails about it, like, what are we going to do to change the air? How are we going to change the temperature? What is little Milwaukie going to do? But what did we do? What did we do? So again, I just don't want to pass the buck, especially if it's been that long. I mean, these are important things that we should really look at. Because if we're not going to make them goals, right, if they're not like directly goals, right, then we have to find other ways to do them, because they're crises right now. Economic development is a crisis, whether we like it or not. Look around. It's not going very well. Look at housing again. It's a crisis. It's not going very well. So why not focus on those things that we aren't directly having as goals and work on those to let the community know, like, hey, we understand what you're facing and this is why we're working on these items.
Well, if I could just say, I think that we do have think about in the realm, and planning can only do so much. Like, we have a role with planning. There's economic development programs, there's other larger programs that this is about like kind of what the planning's work plan is, right? And so we know that as part of the housing production strategy that got adopted, this group identified things that the planning department can do moving forward. And those things are on this work plan, right? So I feel like from a planning perspective regarding housing, we've identified those things, we've adopted that plan, and now those are incorporated into this plan. And I do think from the planning / economic development side, we're working in tandem on the neighborhood hubs project, and planning's looking at the code, right, and making sure that businesses can do what they want to do in those particular areas. And then we also have this other programs that we're working on is economic development. And while it's not specifically targeted around the downtown, it is kind of looking at one of the ideas that we're talking about is whether or not we would start a small business alliance in the city as part of our economic development program.
I'm so happy you brought that up earlier, by the way.
Yeah, so we have been talking about what are the tools that we have in the toolbox to help not only hubs build, but also how we can help other small businesses in the city of Milwaukie grow. So we are trying to tackle some of those issues through this work plan.
I'm probably, that question was more geared towards us. I can see that, like, just the fact that they're on here shows, and I look at this, because I look at it like it all works together, right? Everything ties together. So I look at it like, you know, everybody has a role in each one of these issues, in each one of these areas, right? Planning has a role in economic development, obviously, in housing, and everybody does. I'm just looking at it, that question was more towards us and our prioritization, the council, and our prioritization when we think about this and we're asking these questions is to look at, you know, if you look at either way, whether it's what are our goals and what helps us accomplish those goals, you look at both of those and it helps. If you look at, okay, well, what can we accomplish that's not a goal, that's still dire need for the community, you can look at those same economic development housing. So that was just more of my comments, like, this is how I'm viewing this. This is how I approached it. I looked at it through a lens of what can we do that we're not doing now as a goal that can have impact for the things that people are struggling with. And that's just, you know, I just had to put that out there because that's just how I'm approaching it. And I feel like the economic development and the housing things are what moves the needle, right? And I feel like those things move the needle.
Mayor, if I can. Joseph Brilio, Community Development Director. This conversation has turned into an interesting discussion, and that's why I just wanted to provide hopefully some insights. Maybe I don't even need to say anything, but I'm going to hopefully try to be helpful here. Councilor Kosser-Body, what you bring up is great for a couple of reasons. The few first things that I'll bring up are, we're doing housing stuff, we're doing economic development stuff. It might not be as creative and as sophisticated as it could with a team and with lots of time and money. But I will say there are some things happening. Laura already mentioned a few. What I'm picking up on this conversation is actually the tension of looking at planning, work plan, and then also some maybe, I don't want to speak on behalf of council, but seems to be maybe even some conflict about what is valuable as goals for you. I mean, specifically here. And that's when you said, I think that's more for a conversation between you and your peers, is because it certainly sounds that way from me as a director, listening to the conversation, talk about staff work plan, and then also these other goals and values starting to come up in conflict a little bit with what our current goals. And then also we're almost trying to fit a square into a circle, in some ways. That's what it sounds like from back here. Hopefully that's helpful. But I think there is some worthwhile discussion to be had with some of what's just come out. Is that helpful? Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate that. And again, what's been done so far in economic development has been great, but COVID did a lot of damage. And even though we've moved past COVID, the repercussions of it are still ringing throughout this community, actually throughout the world, really. So that's why I just look at, just wanted to share how I viewed this and how I approached it. And I looked at it as what would move the needle in other areas we're not focusing on as goals. So I appreciate that very much.
Okay, I think we're going to proceed. We've got a work plan that I believe everybody is in general agreement with. So thank you for the conversation, and thank you to Laura for coming back so many times to go through this.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Have a great night.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, it's 8 o'clock. Do folks want a break now, or should we let Adam do his park thing, which I imagine is relatively fast?
It's exciting.
He's even wearing a tie. Like, we should. Okay, I guess no one's clamoring for a break, so we will let Adam talk to us about parks, and then we'll take a break.
Good evening, City Council. Very happy to be here with you all today. Thanks for having me here in prime time on your first meeting here in this great new building. I'm going to try and keep this quick and leave some time for some questions. The first thing I want to say is we have wrapped up our park designs. We do not have the time this evening to go through them in detail. With 21, 22 boards that we have been putting together for over 2 years. We just can't fit that into, what is going to do them justice. Also, we were working on those till about 5:30 this evening. So they are on the city website. They are on Engage Milwaukie. The surveys are live now. One thing, and I will cover this in the presentation, is I would encourage folks, if you have questions or concerns, reach out to me, reach out to our team, talk with us, because we are trying to get some really good informed engagement. So I do want to share that. And so with that, I'm just going to jump into a presentation, which is actually a lot of fun for me to give because it's the rare opportunity to come in front of a group like this and have almost entirely good news. So since I was last here, Bowman Bray Park has been opened up from Where Else Lane. If you hadn't heard, that is a pedestrian and bicycle access point only. Where Else Lane, there at the park, there is only 16 feet wide as a right-of-way, and so it is not physically possible to park a car there past that curve. And so we just want to remind residents that, one, that's for bicycles and pedestrians only. Two, that access point will go away behind a construction fence sometime in the middle of January. Similar to that access point, we are looking at the potential of a temporary access point from Scott Park to what is commonly referred to as the old Nautilus parking lot. I don't really know which direction this is. It's only my second time in this building. It's that way. So the hope is that prior to construction for a few months, we'll be able to go from this building through the parking lot and the park to the library and vice versa. That will greatly relieve some of the congestion that happens in that library parking lot. Very important to this project is that it will give us construction access that does not have to go by the library that has 600 users a day. Somewhat pertinent to the last conversation, we have wrapped up our land use applications. So Belfour and Bowman Bray went through the public hearing process. That was done because we had to go through the CSU process. We did not receive any comments other than the endorsement from the Parks and Rec Board Vice President on Belfour. At Bowman Bray, we expected and did receive 5 or 6 comments, I believe it was, on concerns about access and parking around that park. These came from people that we have been working with for about 2 years. We knew them, we expected them. The Planning Commission and planning staff all agreed that These are issues that are happening outside of the park boundaries, while absolutely related to the park. Weren't the type of issue that we should be discussing in a land use application. So we, at Planning Commission's direction, and what we had planned on doing anyway, was to work very closely with those residents on parking around Bowman Bray Park. And just like with Where Else Lane, there are a lot of things that we just cannot do due to right-of-way widths. And I will remind everybody that all three of these parks that we're talking about here have been designed to be neighborhood parks. And we think that after the excitement dies down, we won't have a lot of concerns about congestion. The Scott Park application did get changed to a type 2 review. If you're not familiar with that, it's a staff level review that is done after properties within 300 feet of the area are sent a letter and given a few weeks to respond to that. We did not receive any comments on Scott Park. We feel as though, just like with Belfour, that is a result of the amount of engagement that we did there. We were able to do a type 2 review and save a considerable amount of time and money on consultants because of the zoning of Scott Park, just to try and tie this into the previous discussion. I will say that the land use decision at the staff level for Scott Park came in yesterday afternoon. And so we are still in the appeal process. If anybody out there would like to appeal the staff decision to allow us to move forward on our land use application, they can reach out to Brett Calver. If you don't know how to get a hold of him, I'll happily show you that way. But I do not expect that we are going to receive a whole lot of comments or any sort of challenges to that. Speaking about engagement, we had a really fun day about 2 weeks ago at the Fiesta Latina de la Parque that NCPRD put on. A lot of people came there early. We expect that they were probably worried about some maybe rain in the future. The rain did hold off, but what that meant is that we started doing engagement and outreach while we were setting up, and I think we probably started talking when we got there, and we did not stop until we left. It was about 5 hours of bilingual outreach to invite people to our upcoming celebration and to weigh in on our final park plans. Do want to apologize to our friends Anthony and Daniel from Easel Consulting, who we did cut out of this photo, but I thought it was more important to show Gabriella and Sasha. Not to bury the headline, but it is official now. We were awarded a $300,000 grant for Scott Park construction. Even though that money is specific for a number of items in Scott Park, it does ensure that we will have those inclusive and accessible playgrounds that are much higher level, what our community was looking for, in all three parks. These are highly competitive grants throughout the state. 45 projects were awarded, and I guess we'll just have to file this one under room for improvement because we were only number 2. Consider this fair warning, City of Bend. We will see you next time.
We're coming for you.
All right. Speaking about the budget, we are sitting somewhere around $3.3 million. There are still a few things that we are discussing with the Library Foundation. At a $3.3 million budget, respectfully, $10,000 is not a whole lot of money for the project. However, for the Library Foundation, it's a considerable amount of money. And so we are taking our time to be really intentional with them to help them realize their goals of having a really great library with that really nice plaza and amphitheater next to the park. Because of where we're sitting at with the budget and our cost estimates, we're going to take our time and figure this out and do it the right way. So that's why you're seeing that in green. The other one is those Safe Street dollars. So those are funds where we can go off-site and provide those connections to the neighborhood through the park, similar to what we were talking about with those connections at Scott Park or Bowman Bray. Also, all of Belfour Park is a Safe Street project. It saved this Belfour Park project about $220,000 because we don't have to do those half-street improvements. It's timed right that we're going to build the park first and then do those street improvements, but we are going to have to do some temporary connections to the street in the right-of-way, and those obviously would have to be replaced after the park is built. So that we expect that to be somewhere around $25,000. All told, our funding is made up almost entirely of grants. And I do want to mention that we have received in the last year $672,000 of new grant funds to help us meet the community goals. So looking at next steps, we have a fantastic open house planned on Sunday. I know there's something going on down here on Friday. No, just kidding. Come to the parade, right? Stay for First Fridays, and then do whatever you got to do on Sunday. Maybe take a nap, sleep in a little bit, because you're going to want to join us on Sunday. But I do want to say that we are doing very intentional engagement on Sunday. If we are going to claim to be doing equitable engagement and engaging with, I think, nearly 800 people at this point, and doing, all these different focus groups, we owe it to our community to go back in front of them in the same way that we did the planning, without the barriers, to say to them, this is what we came up with. Did we get it right? Right? Those people that were really pushing for XYZ amenity, they need to be able to come to me and our consulting team and say, hey, why did you make this decision? I will also point out that while these are final designs, things like fence styles, the exact species of tree, widths of paths, colors, materials, those types of things typically can be tweaked. And so we will be listening to see what the community thinks about that. Not really sure about some of the renderings with the colors, but I'm told that the physical things, the physical playground equipment will look differently than the renderings. So, but that's one of those things where it's like, hey, community, these are the colors that we think we picked out to fit our branding standards. What do you think about them? Of course, there's always the threat that we might have to do some value engineering in construction. We expect that we will find out what these parks are really going to cost sometime at the end of December, early January, and that's because our construction bid is going to go out in mid-November to keep at our timeline. I will say that these parks individually and even combined, they don't make up a whole lot of complicated work. Right, they're walking past pavilions, shelters, irrigation, very typical things on fairly uncomplicated sites. We do know that we used to have some residential buildings on Belfour, and you start digging a hole, you never know what you're going to find, particularly in an urban environment. Right? I never thought I'd be crossing my fingers for a strong El Nino, but I would really love some nice, dry, mild weather this winter to help us meet those deadlines. But what I'm trying to get at is that there is the potential that we might have to push that construction timeline a little bit. We have a little bit of wiggle room in here. We have always said it is our goal. In fact, I think we talked about it when I was interviewed just over 2 years ago, that we're going to open these parks up in October. But we're really not going to know what these parks are going to cost until a construction company tells us what they're going to cost. And while what we're building is not very large and not very complicated individually, we're trying to do 3 at once, which means that our construction managers and myself and work crews and mobilized equipment are going to be all over town, maybe needing to be back and forth. We're probably looking at multiple work crews working on multiple parks on different things at the same time. That kind of stuff is something that as a project manager and a construction manager, we do kind of worry about. We have a really good idea of how we're going to do that, but what we lack in kind of complication and design, we make up for in trying to do 3 in a very tight timeline. I will say that in terms of deadlines, council, you will see a request for us to do an extension and amend our ARPA. That's the American Recovery Plan Act, aka COVID stimulus dollars, that makes up the bulk of our funding, $2.25 million. We will be asking the state for an extension on that, just because it is very easy to do. The state now has a process for this, and they've encouraged us to give ourselves a little bit of breathing room if we need it just in case, right? You don't go looking for a grant extension when you know you need one. You get one before you know you need one. So with that, I will talk about some of the fun things. We have a really great open house and planning meeting planned for Sunday, the 8th here from 11 to 1. We're going to be looking at those final designs. That includes full designs, which are extremely similar to our concept plans, our playground designs, which we've shared with the community a number of times, planting plans. One of the things that we heard in concept planning, probably more than just about anything, was native plants, native plants, native plants. Direction that we received from the last council, particularly at Belfort Park, or excuse me, Bowman Bray Park, was add more trees. We get a lot of questions of, are you cutting down trees? The answer is, if that it is under 4 inches and it is healthy, no, we are not cutting it down. But we will have those detailed planting plans and precedent boards for all 3 of those things for the community to look at. This will be an inclusive and accessible event. We will have Spanish interpretation and all materials in English and Spanish if needed. We would really encourage the community or friends of the community who feel as though we need to provide information in another language or interpretation to reach out now. It can be really difficult as someone trying to do engagement when you have somebody show up and you don't have the resources there for them. We do have a plan for that, and we can follow up with other people in different languages if we don't have them available at the time. But folks can reach out to us now so that we can try to provide at least oral interpretation, if not translated documents. There is a, getting something translated between now and Sunday could be pretty difficult, but we will do our best. And as I mentioned, those surveys, which are nice and quick and needs-based, right? We are putting these plans out there and we want to know, are we meeting your needs? And by your needs, I mean the community's needs. And if not, why not? And how should we do it differently next time? We also want to know if, like, hey, we missed something. What is it, and where would you like to see it next time? So it's a need-based survey assessment. It's a future-looking assessment, and as I mentioned, that's this Sunday, 11 to 1. I've heard some people say, "Oh yeah, they're going to have a clown." We don't have a clown. We have Nikki Brown Clown. Nikki is a literacy, and nutritional advocate. She is extremely well known for her work around Juneteenth and equity in Portland, and has expanded her business to include a lot of other people. So Nikki and her pal Ladybug will be coming and doing some story time with us at 11:15. You can learn more about her and her story and how she developed this persona of Nikki Brown Clown, not only to help provide story time and tell stories to Black and brown children with characters that look like them, read by people who look like them, but she also had her start in Milwaukie County doing free lunch programs, and she was noticing that no one was paying attention to her outreach and no one was coming to her free lunch program because it wasn't fun, it wasn't exciting, and the letters looked like something for the government that you kind of just toss away. And talking with her and getting to know her, listening to some of the podcasts that she's been on that are available on Spotify, the type of work that she does and how she's innovated her work sounds a lot like what the community told us they wanted to do with this park project in our public involvement plan. So we're really excited to have her. Then we're following it up with a great band called Ants, Ants, Ants. This is a family-friendly band inspired by, Sesame Street and Schoolhouse Rock. They are a National Parenting Product Award winner. They have 3 albums out, which you can learn more about on their website. They are available on Spotify. I've been listening to them about a month now. My colleagues have something to say about that, or maybe not to. You should see what I have planned for the ribbon cuttings. But the band is going to go on at 12:15, and we hope that you enjoy this. And then something that's, I think, going to be really quite fun is we are bringing in the Children's Healing Art Project, also known as CHAP. This is a community nonprofit that does workshops, inclusive workshops in the community, particularly in parks. But primarily their work is done in hospital, particularly with children who are facing very difficult, challenging, perhaps life-threatening injuries. And so they bring arts and crafts to the children to help them through the healing process and to work with the families as sort of de facto arts and craft-based social workers. They are a 3-time PDX Parent Picks winner, and they will be coming into Scott Park to be working with children to design 3-dimensional parks of their own. You know, we really love to throw around that term play expert, but to me, the least equitable thing that we could do as a room full of adults is plan playground equipment. I mean, when's the last time we all got on a swing set or got on a composite structure, AKA jungle gym? You know, we need to get these kids involved and have them show us what they want. Now, sometimes those things wind up being physically impossible to build, but we want to get them involved in this process. And we will also be having, you know, a photo booth and button making available if people want to bring home some keepsakes from this celebration. And we'll be doing that from 11 to 1. And if you haven't heard, we are having donuts and chai and hot chocolate. And yes, we did plan this months ago. And we were kind of saying, oh, what's the weather going to be like in October? Well, we definitely got to have something warm to drink. Maybe we'll reach out to Pips to see if they could put some of that on ice, because yes, it is going to be hot in the afternoon. Now this is an 11 to 1 thing, so hopefully, you know, hot drinks are going to be okay, but we do have some really great donuts that we're providing there. So these are free unlimited donuts. We do ask that people fill out a survey and participate there, and we'll be doing that from 11 to 1. And just like with the other big meetings that we've done, we did send out postcards in a similar style to what we have sent out before. These did go out to the entire zip code, which goes across our city boundaries to the south. We also picked out some carrier routes to cover the urban growth area, the UGMA, going out east. We would send these out to the whole district, but that would be incredibly expensive, and it is just cost prohibited. I do want to say one of the things that we were asked as a staff at the Planning Commission, and I kind of realized that maybe we haven't talked about this a whole lot, is we were asked, hey, where's NCPRD? Like, what involvement does NCPRD have in this project? And I wanted to make sure that we let you all know and acknowledge the participation of NCPRD staff. Obviously, there are some things that are being discussed at a much higher level, at your level, but as city staff, we have jobs to do. And NCPRD has been handling this extremely professionally. Their now former, unfortunately, Heather Cook has moved on, but Heather was involved from the very start of this project. She helped us select Greenworks as our lead consultant. She was involved in our public involvement plan. She came to all of our public meetings. She came to nearly all of our PARB meetings as our PARB liaison. We have worked behind the scenes with Kevin Cook and NCPRD staff on every level of detail of these designs, including significant work in the 30 and 75% design process over this past year. So NCPRD, while we maybe have some things that we're discussing at a higher level, and maybe the public isn't necessarily seeing them, as a staff, we have been working very closely with them. And, you know, where we go in terms of parks will be up to all of you. Since we don't know that, we're treating it as though, you know, both parties need to be very well involved. And with that said, I would just remind people, please do watch your mailbox. You should have received a postcard last week. And please do join us on the 8th for that wonderful celebration. If you can't, the surveys and designs are online until the 17th. We will provide all the designs to all of you after this meeting, now that they're all polished up and ready to share. And with that, I'll answer any questions you all might have.
Questions, anyone?
Just one. You had mentioned the branding standards for colors, and that kind of gets to your point about planning with children. I'm just wondering how those match up with the expectations of a focus group of 3 to 10-year-olds.
Yeah.
Or we'll see on Sunday.
We're going to see on Sunday. You know, I think my least favorite decision to make on any project is what color is it going to be? And I am not joking there. It is probably the hardest decision to make. Everyone has an opinion on it. And so we decided that because we have to pick colors to get the renderings done on time to show the public, we can't just put black and white things out there for them and say, pick a color. We have to try to put together a color scheme. And so we did our best with the guidance that we have as our established Milwaukie colors. And we'll get some feedback on that. That is one of those things that can change. It's difficult because everyone has an opinion, everyone has their own style, and it takes a tremendous amount of time and effort to get those renderings done, even in the standard colors. And so we don't get the opportunity to have a bunch of pictures that show all the different combinations that we can do. Also, I have found, these are playgrounds and parks 41, 42, and 43 for me, is that if you can establish some guidelines and boundaries on the conversation around colors, like sticking to those Milwaukie branded colors, that is extremely helpful in the conversation, because if not, we're going to have 22,000 different, like one for each person in the city, combinations of colors for equipment. So we've done our best to get the renderings out there and to share those with the community that we can get some feedback on.
Thank you. That's an incredible amount of work, and congratulations on all of the external grants.
Thank you.
It's a big accomplishment.
I have no questions. Thank you.
Well, I didn't have a question. Oh, I'm sorry. No, I didn't have a question until Councilor Stavenger's question. I had no idea we had branded colors for the parks. I mean, I know we have branded colors for like documents and things, but.
We have branded colors for documents and things, and we have extrapolated that out to our parks.
Oh.
Again, just to have a set palette to pick from, and we don't want to limit the conversation, but without somewhere to start the conversation, I have seen this conversation go very poorly. I would recommend, and this is something we did in my previous community, is we had dedicated conversations on branded colors for equipment, and we did that, and we stuck with it for 6 years. Because it is just one of those things where the color of equipment can just get really controversial, and it's just one of those things that's kind of unexpected. I will say that the bulk of our equipment is wood and natural wood, and so there's not a whole lot of color to be discussed. The slide at Belfort Park, we're able to afford a stainless steel slide. We do think that's appropriate because it's going to be well shaded. It's also much better for anyone that has any sort of medical implant. Plastic slides do sometimes lead to static electricity shock. And so being able to go out and get that grant and afford that stainless steel slide and finding a way to keep that tree canopy healthy above that slide or around that slide at Belfort, we think is going to be really important for a number of reasons. So I guess technically we do not have official park equipment colors, but we worked with the palette that we already had.
Okay, interesting. Well, yeah, I second what Councilor Stavenger said about congratulations. Nice job on the grants. Nice job on getting everything through all its approvals. And I'm looking forward to an event that is as much fun as the one in May with, I assume Millie will be present?
Yes, Millie will be present. I haven't heard yet about the parade.
Rumor has it Millie will be present on Friday afternoon.
Okay. All right.
I do want to say, and I do have a great deal of gratitude, and I appreciate the nice things that you all have said about me. A lot of people are saying nice things to our team. But the truth of the matter is that this is a community project. And Peter Passarelli, community public director, and Peter and I go back and forth on this all the time, but we have always talked about this project has two goals, right? It's equity and parks. It's building community and building parks. And to me personally, the construction of the parks and the planning of parks are just the vehicle to have the conversation and to build that community. And so that's what we're trying to do. Second of all, I will say that I get paid for this. I like this. This is my job. This is what I do. We have a tremendous amount of community involvement here. People are spending a lot of time on this project. They are volunteering and investing in their communities. And these are projects that are going to last for generations, right? Getting those kids involved in designing playgrounds that can be around for 20, 25 years. They're going to be able to bring their kids or their grandkids there and say, I donated my time to my community there. That is an investment in community, and not only, that is an investment in the community that's going to pay off for generations. So, you know, I appreciate you all thanking me and the consulting team that we've been privileged enough to work with, but you really should be thanking our residents who are donating their time to the community. Because I have done, you know, planning processes and design processes where people don't show up. And that has not happened here, and we're really lucky to have that. I also kind of feel like maybe you don't have many questions because there's a break coming.
There's a break, and we have 2 more items, so yeah, we definitely, that may be curtailing questions, but if there are no more questions, we will thank Adam for his presentation, and we will take a break until
Thank you.
8:45. All right, thank you. Yeah. It does it, but it's much slower than the old billing. All right, we're back, and we're here with a hearing now. Substantive code amendments. The public hearing on the proposed substantive code changes is called to order. The purpose of this hearing is to hear the staff report, take public comments, deliberate, and consider adopting a package of substantive code amendments. Does any council member wish to announce actual or potential conflicts of interest? Seeing none, I'll turn it over to Senior Planner Vera Coleus.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, members of council. I can't think of a better way to celebrate Community Planning Month than a code amendment package. So let's.
Oh, and let me just say, I asked, I gave Vera a heads up on this, but we have traditionally been trying to do questions at the end, but I think because this package has a series of, you know, she's the staff report, and I imagine her presentation keeps it in a series of, so I'm going to look to people for questions at the end of each section that she presents.
So the background of this project is these amendments are a bit more substantive than sort of our traditional housekeeping kinds of amendments. There may be a slight shift in policy, but they don't warrant a large public engagement effort. Most of these amendments that I'll be presenting to you this evening came about during a review of recent Type 3 variance applications over the past 5 years, as well as some recent pre-application conferences. So we tried to create a package of amendments that reflected what we're seeing day to day in the planning department. The Planning Commission voted to recommend approval at their public hearing. We did have a work session with council regarding these amendments, and no changes were recommended from council at that time. All right. The first amendment deals with Title 12, which is access management. So that's an engineering set of standards in the code. The proposal is to expand the city engineer's authority to modify some of the requirements through an access study rather than a variance. There are some items within the access management section that require Type 3 variance, and others that an access study can cover. And our experience has been that Type 3 variance process isn't really a good avenue for resolving mathematical engineering issues with development. And since the city engineer already has that authority, it's reasonable to expand that authority to cover the entire subsection and not have discretionary variances going to the Planning Commission for some things. The proposed language also includes revised requirements for the access study, so it's very specific about what that study needs to include to make sure that the city engineer can make that decision based on the study findings, and it also does include an appeal process within that language as well.
Okay.
Okay.
So, I mean, you're not going to go through specific language on that, or?
It's all in the package. It was all in the package,
Okay.
yes.
So
yes.
did anybody have any questions on the access management part of the package?
So it just skips the Type 3 variance.
Correct,
Yeah.
correct, yeah, exactly.
I did have one question I just wanted to understand, and it's on page RS 55. And it is, there's 5, and then there's A, B, C, D under 5. And A is at least 45 feet, and it's about units with 4 or fewer. B is 5 or more, but it references only cottage clusters, and it doesn't reference townhomes. And I wondered if that was intentional, or if...
Oh, that's a good question. No, well, oh, right, because we have townhomes of 4 or fewer units is the 45 feet. Oh, but we don't talk about townhouse. Well, townhouses are in groupings of 4.
Right.
They can't be in groupings of 5.
Okay.
You could have more townhouses, certainly, but 4 is how many, that's the maximum number you can have that are attached within a townhouse development anyway. So we're being specific to make sure that we're consistent with how townhouse development is regulated in Title 19 as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so it wasn't, okay, great. All right, that was That was my only question about that.
All right.
Thank you.
We are proposing a definition change within the code to define plex developments specifically differently from cottage clusters or townhouses. There's some code sections where if we just use the term middle housing, we aren't able to make distinctions with cottage clusters and townhouses, which in some sections of code do have different requirements. So we wanted to make sure that we're calling in instances where we want to make sure that we're just talking about plexes, duplexes, triplexes, and quadplexes, that we actually have a definition for that. So we just want to make sure that it's consistent within the code. Are there any questions?
Any questions on that?
Yeah, just one. I mean, so if you had how do you differentiate a quadplex from a four townhouses?
Sure. So townhouses are by definition, each unit is on its own lot and they are attached.
Okay.
A quadplex can be attached or detached, but they're on one lot.
Right, okay.
So that's the difference.
Okay.
Yep.
It's the underlying land.
Okay.
Other questions?
I'm sorry.
No? Okay.
Okay. This section of code amendments relates to residential development, and it relates to revising the minimum lot size for a townhouse, specifically on a corner lot. The sketch that you see here is from a development that actually happened or has come forward because it's on a corner lot. We have a maximum lot size for townhouses. The problem with that is that doesn't account for the larger street side yard setback on that corner lot. So the intent of our code was never to not allow cottage or townhouses on corner lots, but we need to make sure that we can account for that street side yard setback. The Planning Commission does think that we collectively ought to have a bigger discussion about street side yard setbacks at some point. But in the meantime, before we have that larger discussion, the proposal is to allow for a larger minimum lot size for townhouses only on corner lots to account for that street side yard setback until we kind of have a bigger discussion about what we think setbacks ought to be, for the street facing yards. But until then, this way, we have a larger setback or larger minimum lot size specific for those corner lots.
Any questions?
And is that setback discussion is it specific to the corner lots or is it a general?
Well, street side yard setback is specific to corner lots, but front yard setback is also, it's the front yard and the street side yard are the two setbacks that the commission thinks that we want to, that we should be talking about a bit more. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Okay. Thank you. I'm not seeing other questions.
Okay. We're proposing a revision within the NMIA to revise the applicability of design standards. Right now, there are design standards for new development for any street-facing facade, but there is no dimension about how far back that facade needs to be or can be. The design standards just simply apply if you're a street-facing facade. And what we have found with experience is that some either additions or new buildings are set pretty far back from the street, and we're applying we're applying the kinds of design standards that are more typical to a building that has a real direct relationship with the street, with the sidewalk, with the pedestrian environment. We had a type 3 variance on Moore Street that asked for it very specifically because the design standards would have resulted in a building that was very expensive to build, but it was all the way at the back of the lot, and it didn't really make a lot of sense to require all of these design standards for something like that. So the proposal is that only for development within 50 feet of that front or street side lot line would need to meet those design standards. That gives you 2 bays of parking and an aisle sort of as a dimension. So it's still within 50 feet, you have a relationship with the street if you are a pedestrian or a cyclist or something like that. But beyond that, it's far enough back that it starts to not make a lot of sense to require specific building materials, glazing, that kind of thing within the NMIA. So that's the proposal that only if you're within 50 feet of that street do those design standards apply to your development.
Any questions? Okay, thank you.
Section 500 are supplementary development regulations. This particular pair has to do with 501 and 502. We currently allow for front porches to encroach into the front yard setback up to 6 feet. This proposal asks that back decks and covered back decks also be able to do so. A lot of our development, especially the homes that were built in the 60s and in the 70s, were built right to that rear yard setback, so they have exactly a 20-foot rear yard setback, particularly over COVID, but we keep getting requests for folks that want to build a deck out of the back and put a cover over it, and they needed variances to do that because they already were built to the setback. We think that a front porch is very similar to a back porch or a back deck. And so we are proposing that those back decks be able to encroach up to 6 feet into that rear yard setback, just like front porches are. There are specific requirements. It can't be over 18 inches. So it's really that first floor, that ground floor covered porch. It's the cover that really gets it. You can build a deck out at the ground level, but once you put a cover on it, we measured the setback to the post of the cover. So that was the problem. If you're a second story deck, that's different. And so we wanted to mirror that back deck standard with the front porch standard. So we're asking for that encroachment to be allowed into the backyard.
So anything outside of 6 feet would require a type 3
If you want to go more than
Right.
6 feet, so it maintains at least a 14-foot rear yard setback from your neighbor, yeah.
I will say, and I meant to say this at the beginning, I found it really interesting to watch the Planning Commission hearing on these. I thought they had some really good questions and points. This is one they discussed at some length, but ultimately we're comfortable with it, and yeah.
The second amendment related to this section has to do with the applicability of design standards to a type B accessory structure, which is up to 600 square feet. Currently, our code does not allow for metal siding. It requires siding that is similar to the house, so residential kind of siding. So it's generally siding, wood siding or vinyl siding clad for anything over 200 square feet. We have received, there are a lot of folks that have bigger lots that do want to build shops, and a lot of those come prefab, actually, and they are metal sided. And so in the past, or what we've had to do up until now, because most have not wanted to go through the full type 3 variance process to do this, they've had to attach metal or attach wood siding to their metal shop that they have to be able to meet this standard. And so we thought it was reasonable to request or reasonable to propose that that metal siding be permitted for up to the type B standard, because it's pretty typical to not do a stick-built shop when it gets over a certain size, that they do get them kind of as a kit, but they are metal-sided, not wood. All the other standards, of course, for accessory structures and lot coverage and all of that would still be the same, setbacks, all of it. It's specific to the siding of the
And it's also the height.
The height stays the same. This is for a type B, has a height limit already.
Okay.
What we're talking about is the siding material.
Okay, I guess I thought that also was going up. I do have questions on this one, but anybody else have questions on this one?
Just a question, what drove the 600-foot square limit?
Oh, that's a good question. That's been in our code since well before I started here, that we have 3 types. So up to 200 square feet has a certain setback. It's 3 feet from rear and side yard setbacks. Up to 600 square feet is a 5-foot setback. And then if it's over 600 square feet for an accessory structure, you have to meet the base zone standards. So there's a table in our code, but I don't know what's the magic properties.
This mirrors the existing code.
Yeah, it's from the existing code. I think 20 by 30 is a pretty standard kind of mid-size for some of these shops, but I'm not sure kind of where I don't know the legislative history of that. Sorry, no.
Other questions? So you made the point that, it's generally people with larger lots who are looking to build these, and that the lot coverage standards all still apply.
Right.
So if somebody builds one of these and then decides a year or 2 later they want to build an ADU, they would still have to, that ADU, they would still hit up against the lot coverage standards?
Yeah. ADUs have, we have some exceptions for so glad I brought my binder. ADUs, we do have, hold on. We do have we allow for an increase in lot coverage for detached ADUs. So whatever you get an extra 5 percentage points of lot coverage to accommodate an ADU. So you don't get to do whatever you want, but we do, the code allows for a little bump just for ADUs.
Okay. And just for detached? Or
Detached.
also attached?
It's very
No?
specific to detached
Okay,
ADUs, yes.
interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I have some thoughts on this one, but they come as more as deliberation than questions, so I will hold them off for now. So, yeah.
Okay. All right. The next set of amendments has to do with cottage clusters. The proposal is to allow, so in our RMD zone or our moderate density zone right now, our cottages have to be detached cottages within a cottage cluster. The proposal is to allow for attached cottages in the RMD up to 3 in a grouping. It doesn't change the maximum size of the individual dwelling itself. That all stays the same per the state requirements, but it would allow for some more flexibility in the site design and would allow for some more efficient construction of those. So so everything else stays the same, but the ability to attach them is what we are proposing. We already allow for attached cottages in the high density residential zone, but we don't say how many. So we thought that was important so that they aren't all attached. So we are limiting the number of attached cottages to 4 in a grouping in the RHD. So that's the proposal, to actually have a limit on the number in a grouping in the RHD, but to actually allow for attached cottages. We've had some pre-application conferences for cottage clusters. Some of them are all detached, but we've had some that have asked for attached cottages as well, meeting all the other standards. And we didn't think that a type 3 variance was the avenue for something like that if they're meeting all of the other standards and still meeting the intent of what a cottage cluster is supposed to provide. So that's the proposed amendment.
Questions? I guess I had one, which was, you answered the question earlier that this isn't so much about how many are attached, but about the cottage cluster standards generally. You answered the question earlier that a townhome is on a separate lot.
Right.
A cottage cluster can be, didn't we pass code to make it easier to carve them into separate lots?
Yes, that's through a middle housing land division. So
Okay.
you could do that afterwards. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So they can be either on a collective lot owned by one person and be a condominium kind of an arrangement, or rentals, I guess, or they can be carved up into individual lots.
Yes, and they would generally, they wouldn't have frontage like a townhouse is set up like right at the sidewalk.
Yeah.
The cottages you could draw lot lines around each cottage. There would still be some kind of a homeowners association to manage all of the common area and all of that.
Right.
But if someone wanted to do a fee simple sale for the cottages, then they could come in with a middle housing land division and do it that way, yes. And that's the Senate Bill 458 is what gave us all of those requirements.
Okay. Do you see requests for that?
Not
We
yet.
haven't had any bill yet, but.
No, but in the
we know some.
pre-apps,
Yeah.
I think we've had one that was asking about, now, how would we go about doing that?
Yeah.
And it's mostly because my limited understanding of financing of condominiums seems to be pretty difficult, at least here in Oregon. So having a fee simple way of dealing with, you can still sell, obviously, as a condominium unit, the cottage, but having the actual property go with it apparently can improve financing in certain situations. So, but they haven't done anything yet, of course, but they asked about it, yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. And this is the last slide, I believe. Yes, so Brett and Adam, who were working on the EV infrastructure code in a previous code amendment, asked that we add this to clarify the applicability of the infrastructure requirements in the code to make sure that it It was very clear that the EV infrastructure gets triggered when there are new parking spaces and a new structure is built. It's not clear in our existing code. That reflects state code of what the applicability is of those infrastructure requirements, and that it does include new commercial parking structures is part of that applicability of the EV infrastructure as well. So they asked for some additional language to make sure that it was very clear when the EV infrastructure is required for projects. And then the new thing since the work session, when we did the housekeeping amendments and we consolidated, or we split out actually the design standards for 1 to 4 units for cottage clusters and then for townhouses, there was a section within the cottage cluster part when it was in the original form that didn't get pulled over into the new cottage cluster part. So it's not reflected in the code now, but it should have been. So it's a absolute staff error and just, it was a cut and paste error that it should have gotten pulled over. So it was very specific to language regarding garages and their allowance within a cottage cluster. So it's not new language, it just didn't get moved over like it should have. So we've asked that that be corrected through this code amendment. It's always nice to have an open code amendment package whenever we feel like it and we can, we find something wrong, maybe we can fix it. So hope that's okay. But it really was a script. I'd like to think of it as a Scrivener's error on that part. But, and that concludes the package of amendments. That's
right. Questions for Vera? Okay, I had 2 more.
Okay.
One was just kind of wanting to understand, well, both of them are kind of wanting to understand. There's a little one in there that didn't make your staff report because you probably thought it was too little to worry about, but Title 17 compound lot line adjustments.
Oh my God, yes.
Why, lot line adjustments always make my, kind of eyes roll back in my head. But can you explain to us what that is and what's driving the desire for that?
Compound lot lines are so the code really wants lots to be squares, as rectilinear as possible. And sometimes existing development on a lot means that you need to draw a little jig-jag of a line when you're creating new lot lines. The code right now allows you to have a little jig-jag of a 10%. And that means that from the corners, that distance, 10% of that distance is what the little jig-jog is allowed to be. And it's come up that, and it just makes it easier for everybody if your lot line is simpler to find, right? But we have found that because folks are partitioning existing lots or something like that, if you're doing just a straight up subdivision and it's a whole lot of lots, it's much easier to draw everything as a square or close enough to a square. But when there's existing development and people are trying to carve out an additional lot, we have found more and more examples of folks not being able to meet that 10%, and then they need a type 3 variance to have it be a little bit longer of a jig-jog. And so we thought that we would give folks a little bit extra wiggle room for that without needing to go through a variance. So we thought a 20% distance was still reasonable, still gave people a little bit more creativity in trying to draw the lines, but it didn't mean that you could do whatever kind of line you wanted. So we were just trying to minimize the number of variances that would go to the Planning Commission for something like that. There really is there isn't an impact for that. It's a lot of process to have to take care of that. So we wanted to increase the ability to draw a little weird line for property lines.
Okay, and the other one, probably the single thing the Planning Commission talked most about, well, maybe not, there were a couple things that they went at some length about, but was vacation rental screening backyards and fences or plant screening of backyards. And I see that text is stricken out in our version. But that text wasn't in the statute, in the ordinances before. It was proposed for addition, and now it's just not proposed for addition?
It is not. It was originally, when we did a work session with the Planning Commission, it was generally thought that, yeah, we'll consider it. And so we put it into the package for the public hearing, and it shouldn't have been in the session that you had, that this had. When we got to the public hearing, it did not get support and was not recommended to move forward to you for consideration. So it should not have been included, but I think it had ended up sort of being talked about, and I didn't want to totally take it out and pretend it never happened. But the Planning Commission did not recommend approval of that, so it shouldn't have been reflected in your package of code. But no, it was kind of there was a lot of discussion about that, but the vote did not support that particular amendment, no.
Okay. All right, any other questions for Vera? Have we received any additional correspondence on the topic?
We have not.
Have we received any correspondence on the topic? All right. Any further questions for Vera before I go to the public comment, which I'm assuming we don't have any public comment? Okay. Does anyone wish to comment on the proposed substantive code changes? So there's no one in the room to comment. Mr. Stauffer, is there anyone online seeking to comment?
We do have one person who's called in on Zoom, but they have not raised their hand.
Okay. So for the person listening on Zoom, you have a minute here to raise your hand if you want to testify. We're going to assume you do not want to testify about this, and I'm not going to read the whole script about that if you don't want to testify. Okay, no action. Okay. Then there's a question here about staff having a response to testimony, which of course that is inapplicable since there was no testimony. And another chance to ask questions of staff. Okay.
Actually, yeah, just real quick, I'm sorry, because I didn't get a chance to watch this. The planning commissioner that voted no, did they get a chance to express why?
It was very specific to that vacation rental screening requirement, I think, if I'm understanding your question.
For all these amendments, it was a 4-to-1.
It was,
Right,
and it was
okay.
specific to that vacation
Specific to
rental
that one.
screening requirement, so.
That was the only one
Yeah,
that
that
there
member
was an issue
wanted
with.
that in, and no one else did.
Thank you, I
Yeah,
appreciate
sure.
that.
Okay, if there are no more questions, I will entertain a motion to close the public comment part of the hearing.
I move to close the public comment part of the substantive code changes hearing.
I second.
It's been moved and seconded to close the public comment part of the substantive code changes hearing. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. None heard. The public comment part of the substantive code changes hearing is closed. Is there any council discussion? So, I will say there are two parts of this. Overall, I think it's a great package. They're good changes that make sense, just to make things easier for applicants and staff. But there are two parts of it I'm not crazy about. One is that issue of the screening of the yards at vacation rentals. I think we want to discourage vacation rentals personally. I think they take housing away from our residents. They are a profit-driven effort by people. And if they're going to make, and I happen to know a couple people who do vacation rentals, and I have a good sense of how much profit they make over their mortgage payments. So I'm not concerned about, I do like the idea of providing more privacy for the neighbors, or confining what happens there. I will note that even though the vote was 4-to-1, Planning Commission Chair Jacob Sherman actually was pretty conflicted on it, and he talked about it for quite a while, being the neighbor of one of the vacation rentals and seeing pros and cons. I think I'm not concerned about the cost we put a vacation rental to, because that's a pretty profitable undertaking, and I don't think it's great public policy to have our housing used up in that way. That said, I felt like the the deliberations among the planning commission were, really fully fleshed out the idea. And they, discussed it pretty fully. And a couple of them were pretty strong on why they objected. So I'm willing to defer to them on that one. Because I do feel like they sussed it out and they discussed it and they made a reasonable decision, even if it's not the decision I would have preferred. The other part that concerns me, though, they didn't really discuss, and that's the 600 square foot metal buildings. I will tell you, if my neighbor put up a 600 foot metal building 5 feet from my lot line, I would not be very happy. And I think there are a lot of people in town. I think this is a pretty substantive change that needs more vetting and more discussion. I remember the discussions around, not allowing metal buildings. And I mean, a 200-foot building is one thing. A 600-foot building is quite another. So that one really, it disturbs me from the aesthetics point of view and the impact on neighbors of that. Again, if the yard is fenced, it's maybe different, or if there's planted screening, it's maybe different, but we don't require those things. And also think about it in terms of the housing. Like, is 600-foot shops what we want to encourage when we're always talking about encouraging housing? And it will take away, it won't always take away the ability to add a ADU, but it will certainly impose more restrictions on the ability to subdivide a lot and do things with the lot, build a fourplex or whatever. So I'm not a fan of that one.
Is it just because of the size, the 600 square feet? Or is it the metal?
It's the metal. It's the metal. It's like having a portable building plopped next to your backyard,
Yeah, but I also look at the cost of adding wood siding to it. I mean, that's expensive for whoever's putting that shop on. And some of these shops are used for work, like not like recreational work, but like work to fix things, repair things, things
Sure.
like that. So I would hate to put more cost on. I mean, and I wouldn't want to start telling people specifically what they, that they can't put a metal sided shop on their own property. I would feel like that's kind of an overreach.
Well, we've been telling people that for many years.
Yeah, right. But I mean, which is why we're changing it now, though. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I will tell you, having had a enormous shop added a block from me that is sided like the house. It is sided like the house, but, and so it's aesthetically not bad, but it's an enormous shop that towers over houses around it. 600 square foot isn't going to tower. Well, we didn't talk about height, so I guess there's a height limit for.
15 feet, right? Oh, they said 15 feet.
I think we have houses that are, not much more than 600 square feet. So this is a size, in certain areas, this is a pretty sizable building. It's, almost comparable to the houses on the block. So yeah, that's my concern. I feel like it's just something I think we should have had a bigger community discussion about, because I have heard, complaints about these kind of structures before. That's what led to I think some of the restrictions that were in the earlier code.
I'm curious to know what were the complaints, just of the aesthetics, just because of the way it looks?
Yeah.
Really?
Because it looks, I mean, a metal building over time
It's a
looks.
workshop. It's going to look like a workshop.
But it's also in someone's backyard, so what I put in my
Exactly.
backyard is my property.
Right.
I mean, I could care less what Joe Blow walking by thinks about how it looks. I mean, we
doesn't
get,
pay my mortgage.
but like Councilor Khazrabadi said, we're getting into property rights, and, you know, I thought it's the American dream to buy a house, have land, and do what you want on it.
That's
hear
what the
you're
whole code is about.
Yeah. I know.
Creating that balance between neighbors, creating that balance between your right to do whatever you want and
Sorry.
yeah.
So, my house has a metal workshop on the property right behind my house. It's not 5 feet away from my property line. It's probably a foot or less from my property line. It's not pretty. But, you know, I put up a fence, I put up a lot of trees and foliage and everything like that, and no big deal.
So for your right to put what you want in, you know, for one person's right to put what they want in their
It
yard.
was already there.
The neighbor, well.
It was already there.
Right, but the onus was then on you to put up the fence.
I made the decision to move to that property. I knew it was there. It's not like I found it, you know, the day that
Yeah,
movers
but
were
that's
there.
not the situation most people are in, you know, I mean,
I'm just saying that it's not a big deal.
yeah.
Yep.
I do think it's a big deal. At 200 feet, no. At 600 feet, yes. So, yes.
And the only reason I look at the aesthetics is because aesthetics is the same excuse or reason why we don't have more housing capacity within our own neighborhoods. Like the reason why we don't, like the big complaint with aesthetics has been around housing, right? Like, oh, we don't want these big developments in our neighborhoods, even though they provide more housing. I don't like how, when it comes to things like that, aesthetics being the reason, I don't think, so because I don't like what my neighbor's property looks like, I have a right to tell them not to build that. Like, that just doesn't seem right. Like, it just doesn't. I mean, like Councilor Massey said, I mean, same thing. Before you buy a house or anything like that, a lot of times that's already there. And if somebody decides to build that while you are living there, if you decide that it's bothering you that much, then just like they have a right to build it, you have a right to block it.
But why should you pay for that?
You don't have to. If you only have to do that if it's bothering you that much.
Yeah.
Right? But why should somebody else who owns their own property, pays the taxes on their own property, have to adhere to what their neighbor wants them to do with that property? I just find that odd. And again, the aesthetics, it just, every time when I hear that, it just brings me back to the reason why we don't have higher density residential in our neighborhoods, because of aesthetics, even though we're in a housing crisis.
Well, I was
So
gonna say,
it's-
that's a little bit different.
It's different.
Use
I'm
of
just
the
saying, when I
word
hear the
aesthetics.
when I hear that and they say just because it doesn't look good in the neighborhood, there's a lot of historical context with that excuse as well, a lot. So it just, you know, if that's the biggest complaint, I mean,
Yeah.
it's not enough to get me to change that. Sorry.
Okay. Anybody else want to be heard? All right. Is the council ready to vote?
Yes, I am.
Okay. I'll entertain a motion.
I move for the first and second readings by title only and adoption of the ordinance amending municipal code Title 12, Streets, Sidewalks, and Public Places, Title 17, Land Division, and Title 19, Zoning, to make changes to select sections for the purpose of clarification and improved effectiveness. File number ZA-2023-002.
A second?
It's been moved and seconded for the first and second readings by title only and adoption of the ordinance amending municipal code Title 12, Streets, Sidewalks, and Public Places, Title 17, Land Division, and Title 19, Zoning, to make changes to select sections for the purpose of clarification and improved effectiveness. File number ZA-2023-002. 2023-002. All those in favor, is there further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. No. So it passes 4-1. Ms. Ober, would you, since the vote was not unanimous, the ordinance must be read at 2 separate meetings. Ms. Ober, please read the ordinance one time in full.
An ordinance of the City of Milwaukie, Oregon, amending Municipal Code Title 12 Streets, Sidewalks, and Public Places, Title 17 Land Division, and Title 19 Zoning, to make changes to select sections for the purpose of clarification and improved effectiveness. File number ZA 2023-002.
The second reading and adoption will be set for the next council meeting on October 17th, 2023. Thank you, Vera. Council reports. I have a couple, but anybody want to start? Nobody has anything to report? No meetings?
I will next week, if we have a meeting.
Mayor, I don't have any reports, but I do have an item for the body. So when you're done, I do want to just talk for a minute.
Okay. If Scott, I sent everyone a letter of support for a climate and equity really related ask that we got from a group working to try to get some of the federal Inflation Reduction Act money to channel into electrification of affordable housing. They had a much longer letter that they presented to me, but I cut it down by about half because they wanted us to commit to, being part of a advisory group going forward and other things. And I knew that was a bigger discussion. So this is just about supporting their ask, and their application is going in on Friday. This doesn't commit us to anything. It's just a support for their effort to get some of that federal funding and funnel it in what looks like there was a memo attached as well as this that gives background of sort of what their structure, and it's a multifaceted kind of program to reach out to and work with communities in affordable housing. So I would hope that people would be okay with signing off on this letter.
I can support it.
You can support it.
I'll support it.
Yes. Okay. All right. I'll follow up with Scott tomorrow then about signing it, getting it on letterhead and signing it and everything. All right. Thank you. Ms. Ober?
Next week, we have our study session is at the jail. We've got a tour. So we have 3 staff who are going with you. Nicole is going to go, Luke will be going, and I will be going. We will all be driving. So we are meeting here at 4:45 if people would like to ride with us, or they can meet over at the jail, I believe at 5:15? Yeah, at the main entrance. So it's up to you, but 4:45 here if you would like to get a ride, or 5:15 on site, and please just let one of us know so we don't wait for you. Thanks.
Great. Thank you. Anything else from anyone in terms of, okay. After the work session, council will meet in executive session pursuant to ORS 192.6602H to consult with counsel regarding the legal rights and duties of a public body with regard to litigation, current litigation, or litigation likely to be filed. With that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
A second.
It's been moved and seconded to adjourn. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. We are adjourned.